Ralph, are you ready to go?
Sure.
Welcome and good evening to a regular meeting of the Norwich Selectboard. This is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. My name is Marcia Calloway. I'm currently serving as chair. I'm joined by, in alphabetical order, board members Roger Arnold, Mary Layton, vice chair, Pamela Smith, and Priscilla Vincent. This meeting is being held in hybrid format with the board and public attendance in Tracy Hall meeting room, as well as through Zoom technology, which allows for remote participation. In addition, CATV Jam is broadcasting the meeting via YouTube. As always, the agenda and packet materials were distributed via the Norwich listserv and are also available on the town website under the Select Board tab. For housekeeping reminders, the agenda tonight is very full as usual. Board members and the public attendees are asked to focus all comments so that we can understand the concerns expressed in the most time-efficient manner. If someone has already expressed a concern or opinion, please feel free to be recognized by the chair for the limited purpose of conferring with that person. As you will note, there are no microphones, but rather the owls, which pick up sound and pictures. Board members must remember to speak clearly and loudly so that all participants in person and remote can hear what we are saying. For members of the public who are attending in person tonight, please come to the table in front of the board so that the remote participants can hear and see you as well. For remote public questions or comments through Zoom, please raise your hand to be recognized by the chair before speaking. For remote public questions or comments through the telephone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute after being recognized by the chair. Our interim town manager, Brendan Duffy, will be managing admission to the meeting along with our JAM assistant, and I will be monitoring the Zoom view to acknowledge participants who wish to speak. Please know that we will reach everyone who wants to comment and that the order will generally be select board members, then members of the public attending in person, and then people participating remotely through Zoom. The first item on the agenda tonight is agenda review. I would note that we included a placeholder on the agenda in case there appeared to be any need to revisit the issue of an Article 10 revote. To my knowledge, there is no new information and the board did not previously decide that a revote was required. If that is still true, then I believe we could entertain an amendment to amend the agenda to remove item 11, possible Article 10 revote action. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended to eliminate item 11?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would like to inquire with the auditor if we are correcting our assumption that a revote is not needed.
The auditor?
Yes. The auditor understands grant funds and revenue funds. And I would defer to some advice from the auditor.
Interesting.
I can make a motion.
Right.
I move to adopt the agenda as amended.
Second thought. Okay.
Okay, now we're in discussion.
Now we're in discussion, so you can, Mary.
Oh, just that, Cam, could you bring that up during the auditors?
I would think that we need to leave it on the agenda if the auditor thinks that it's wise to have that revote. That's why I said that I thought we should defer to the auditor. If the auditor says, yes, I think a revote is needed, then why would we take it off our agenda?
All right, I'm going to ask, this is perhaps a fairly unfair question, but I'm going to pose it to our auditor who's here tonight with us, who is Rick, and I'm sorry, Rick, your last name is?
Brigham.
Brigham. Thank you. Welcome to our meeting. You're a little bit early just because we have a question that you brought up. Did you hear the question? And so I can elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, if you could elaborate. I didn't catch the question and I just caught something about a revote. So I'm need a little bit more information.
Of course. So the ARPA money that has been received by the town was put into potentially put into something, at least a numbered account called number 49. I think we thought that that was a reserve account. And we thought that what we were doing was putting on the warrant for the annual meeting a sort of housekeeping vote that said, would the people in town want to vote to create a reserve fund for the ARPA monies? It didn't say how much money would be put into that fund, just would people vote for that? Subsequently, we discovered that there are specific rules around when monies can be put into a reserve fund, ARPA monies. Therefore, there was a question about whether we needed to have a subsequent vote to ask people if they would basically rescind the first vote. We don't, in talking about it, because there was no actual monies voted, and if there is in fact no reserve fund with monies in it, the question was, do we need to have a revote because we really haven't created a reserve fund with monies in it? So if with that funky explanation, you can understand the problem, do you have an opinion?
Well, I guess I'd start when I'm looking at your audit report, there is a fund called ARPA fund that is separate already. So I'm not sure I understand the question because it's already separate in a separate reserve fund. I know that a lot of my clients are figuring out how to spend the ARPA money, and that seems to be the big item that people have been working on. And a lot of my clients have been trying to use it to spend on municipal services, salaries, things like that, so that they can unrestrict the monies that are attached to it. And then they will have fund balance that they can use for other things that might be guided in the direction that ARPA committees have established. I don't know if that helps or not.
It does. So I guess the question then is, when you look at our accounts, you think that we have a reserve fund with money in it with our money?
If you look at page 7 of the audit report,
Yes.
you'll see that basically I've listed the general fund there and the ARPA fund there. So you can see the ARPA activities there. And I don't think there was much activity during the year, obviously, but it is where the money is being held right now.
So,
Roger, do you have a question?
I guess since we're having this discussion in an agenda setting and given I think it's appropriate that we talk about ARPA and the reserve fund question during the audit report. And so in the interest of moving us along, I might suggest that we call the question. But yeah, I might suggest that we call the
All right,
question.
what we're trying to do is figure out whether we need to leave a placeholder on this agenda for whether we're going to decide if we need to have a town.
And it may seem appropriate to get more information in the auditor's report to discuss this as a future agenda, perhaps. But for this evening, I don't think we need to leave a placeholder, which is why I might ask that we call the question.
All right, I'll just add that I think that we were, the town clerk was working towards setting up a special town meeting with the school district. And if we still had time to get in on that, we might actually need to move tonight. So for that purpose, I think we should probably keep it on the agenda. But let's call the question. Patricia, how do you vote?
Priscilla.
Oh, gosh, I don't know why I do that. Priscilla, I'm going to put her name on. Tell me what I'm voting on again. Priscilla, would you like to see item 11 on the agenda remain or be removed?
But the motion is to remove it.
The motion is to remove it. If we remove it, we cannot talk about it tonight in terms of putting it, voting to have it put on the special election that's going to be held by the school board. I prefer to keep it. So you vote no, yes. Yes, I vote no. Pamela,
I'm a no.
no. Roger,
I'm a yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Marcia, no. Okay,
So
So-
we're keeping that.
so we are.
So I saw another motion. That's okay.
You may make a motion, Roger.
I move to approve the agenda.
Do we have a second for approval of the agenda as written?
I will second that.
All in favor? Unanimous. Good. Okay. Thank you for your help with that, Rick.
Yep.
Now, let's see, where are we? Agenda review we just done, informational items. So our first item under the informational items is the auditor's presentation of their audit findings. This report was made to the select board, and this is our first opportunity to hear from the auditor and to ask questions. We're grateful they've agreed to meet with us at this hour, and we want to be respectful of his time. Therefore, I would ask the board to listen to the presentation, make note of any questions you have, and wait until the presentation is finished before asking those questions. For members of the audience, either in person or remote, please direct any question you might have to me as chair, and if the auditor can answer, he may do. If answers are not possible at this time for any reason, we can collect those questions, pass them on to the auditor as appropriate, and any answers would be included in our next regular select board package. With that, I would like to welcome Director Ben again and ask you if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you giving me some time tonight to go over the audit report for fiscal year 22. I am a partner with Sullivan Powers and Company. This is our first year doing the audit for the town of Norwich. I believe we audited Norwich many, many, many years ago, which probably going to date myself a little bit if I say when, but this is our first year back, and I appreciate the time to be able to go over stuff with you. So I'm just going to quickly kind of go through the report and what you're looking at and what's in there. Obviously, there's almost 100 pages here, so trying to go through it in detail would take too long. So I'm going to give you a quick summary. If we're looking at pages 1 through 4, that's really what what's called the auditor's opinion. So based on the financial statements, based on our procedures, based on the work that we do, we have 4 different types of opinion we can give. An adverse opinion, which basically means the financial statements are not fairly stated. A qualified opinion means they're fairly stated except for something that is causing it to be not in conformance with generally accepted accounting principles. Or unqualified opinion, meaning there's no qualifications to the opinion. A 4th one is called a disclaimer of opinion. A disclaimer of opinion basically means that we are not giving an opinion on the financials. We're giving you the results and how the numbers in a financial statement format, but that we can't give an opinion. And in this particular case, obviously everybody's aware that with the transition in the manager's office and in the finance team throughout the year, this was not an easy audit to perform. And there were a lot of things that, we were trying to accumulate information, and we got an outside consultant that you hired to come in and kind of help gather stuff and present for the audit. That all went pretty well, but the fact that the outside consultant couldn't sign a client representation letter stating that we've received all the materials, we've received all the cash accounts, we've received all the minutes. Somebody has to sign that representation letter who's provided the majority of the information. And without that representation letter, we really can't give an opinion on the financials. So in this particular case, for this particular year, we had to disclaim on the opinion. I don't know exactly how we're going to get around that for 23. And I'd like to be able to maybe talk with Brennan at some point as you figure out the year-end reconciliations and how you're going to, and whether you've got a new finance director. Obviously, if you've got a new finance director, this won't be an issue. But if the outside consultant can't sign the representation letter, we might run into the same problem, but I'm hoping that doesn't happen. Looking at pages 5 through 6. Pages 5 through 6 is basically what we call the government-wide financial statements. This takes all your funds, all your debt, all your fixed assets, combines it together, and makes it look like a business. just like any of the businesses you would run or operate. This is on the accrual basis of accounting. It books all your debt and fixed assets, takes it all with your cash accounts, and gives you a good summary of where the town's at. Most people are focused, if you look at page 7, on their general fund. And so if you're looking at page 7, you're basically seeing the balance sheet of the general fund. A balance sheet is basically a snapshot, a picture in time of exactly where your assets and liabilities stood for your major funds, which in this case was your general fund and your ARPA fund. The rest of your funds are combined into what that other column is called the non-major governmental funds. There's schedules of those all in the back. That's all the rest of your other funds for capital projects, special revenues, grants, stuff like that. That's all in individual grants, and you'll see them laid out in schedules in the back that will give you much more detailed information by fund type. But you can see here in the general fund at June 30, 2022, you had total fund balances of $1,790,000 in the general fund. 172,000 of it was non-spendable. 302,000 was committed, and the rest was unassigned. Kind of going through, if you look at pages 12 through 38, those are what we call the notes to the financial statements. If you're looking for any sort of detail on on backup for the numbers, the cash accounts, if they're insured, if they're FDIC covered, if they're what terms of the debt agreements or debt arrangements out there, all those are going to be in the notes in much more detail. It's going to tell you about all your fund balances, why they're restricted, what they're committed for, and give you a lot more detail. If I'm looking at pages 39 through 54, this is probably something you're really used to seeing all year long. This is your budget actual for your general fund. So this is just showing you how the year wrapped up with all the different revenues and all the different expenses throughout the year, and kind of shows you the variances, both positive and negative, and how you got to if you're looking at the last page, you're seeing that that there was you were budgeted to lose 860,000 and you lost 524,000. So difference of about 335,000. The other things I was just going to point out, like I said, if you go to the back pages 59, 60, 61, 62, those are all the balance sheets and income statements of all the small funds that you have, or I wouldn't call them small funds, but all the rest of the funds you have, land management, recreation scholarships. So if you're looking for any of the activity that relates to a specific fund, it's going to be back there in those, other than the ARPA fund and the general fund, which are up front. So whenever we're doing an audit, one of the things we have to do as auditors is one of our charges is when we're going through our procedures, if we notice any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, we note them in the scheduled findings. And as you'll see, we have 7 findings that we've reported in here related to material weaknesses or significant deficiencies of things that we think that the town can improve on. I'm going to save going over them. I'm pretty sure the town has already gone over them themselves, but if there's specific questions on these when we're done, I'll be glad to go through them individually if you want, but I didn't want to take up your time going through each one of them if there's only certain ones you wanted to talk about. So that's, like I said, that's kind of the summary of what the audit report. Like I said, this audit was filled with challenges, but I really wanted to thank the staff and management who helped us get through all this to get to at least get the report out in time and get you the results. I totally think that if we're going for 2023's audit is going to have a much better result as far as the findings. I looked at the responses that were given to us related to the findings, and I feel like if the town ensures that they carry out those responses, that all those findings will probably disappear in the new year. But I'd be glad to talk about those in more detail as you'd like. Just some other required communications that I have to give you. We encountered no difficulties in dealing with management, no disagreements with management, and there was no consultations with other accountants. And management posted all entries that we recommended. So those are all in the financials of all of the adjustments we found. So that's pretty much my presentation. I didn't know if anybody had any specific questions.
Yes, Pam Smith.
Thank you. There was a comment made that we were slated to lose $860,000. I think there's a misunderstanding. There was $750,000 that was voted to go into the unanticipated and emergency fund out of the general fund, and $110,000 to go to an operational something or other fund.
Correct.
So we weren't slated to lose any money. We still have that money, and that was not to be viewed as a deficit, but just a reclassification, I guess is the word, to move it from one fund.
Yeah, a transfer. Yeah, basically your budgeted deficit makes up of those two transfers, the 750,000 and the 110,000. But those transfers are showed in the budget actual, so it appears to come through as a budgeted deficit.
So what is our actual ending number? Do we have a surplus or deficit for the year?
Let's go back.
I was looking on page 54.
So yeah, for the year you had a deficit of 524,009. You'll see at the bottom or in the middle of page 16.
But we don't have a deficit. We still have that money.
You had a excess of revenues over expenses for the year. Your as we talked about with your general fund balance, I already mentioned what the fund balance is at the end of the year, which is $1,790,377. Now that 1 million, because of the way rainy day funds work, you can't you could go ahead and create that fund, but when I have to roll it up into a financial statements under GAAP, that rainy day fund had to get rolled back up into general fund. So you're not going to find that reserve fund, that 750,000 as a separate fund in the back. You're going to see that in the footnotes where that basically got rolled back up into the general fund.
I'm not following that.
So basically you had voted to set up a rainy day fund, $750,000.
Right.
Government generally accepted accounting principles does not let us take a rainy day fund and create a separate fund for it. So when we report on it, it has to get rolled back up into the general fund. So when we take your if you look at your numbers in the general fund surplus, it includes that rainy day fund.
Okay, looking at page 54, I see a net change in fund balance of $379,834. What does that represent?
I'm sorry, I'm not, where are you looking?
At the bottom of page 54.
Yep.
Net change in fund balance, $379,834.
Yep.
Then we have the July 1, 2021 fund balance of $1,410,000. So that comes out to the $1,790,377 that you referred to. So
yep.
Do we have a surplus of $379,834?
According to GAAP accounting, combining those funds, you have, if you look back on Exhibit D, page 8, you're going to see where the $379,834 comes in, your profit for the year, basically. But that doesn't take into account what we're trying to do in this bottom of page 16 or page 54 of the budget actual. You're going to see that we're reconciling, basically getting from your budget accounting down to your GAAP accounting, taking you from the 524,009 negative to the 379,834 positive that you'll see on Exhibit 8 on page 8.
So again, my question is our surplus at the end of the year, when you take all of those things into account, $379,834.
When
Is
you
that
take
money
in-
able to spend?
That is a surplus for the year that rolls up into the fund balances of the 1,793,377. So the 1,793,377 is accumulation of all your surpluses and deficits over the years.
Right,
So most people will focus on the fund balance of what's our fund balance right now. And that's why I kind of focused on that when we were going through the presentation.
right. But it's important for us to know if we had a surplus or a deficit.
Yeah. Well, again, as Exhibit B shows, or Exhibit D shows, you have the 379,834. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. So we had a deficit of 524,009.
But that's taken into account the $860,000, which is still there. It just moved to a different place in the financials. So if you look at the bottom of page 54, he's made adjustments of that negative
Exactly.
5.09, and he brings back in the 750 and the 110, which is the $860,000. So we net out a surplus for FY22 of $379,834.
Correct.
That's how much more money we have in our general fund than we had at the beginning of the year.
Just generally what we do every month, yes.
So that 750,000, wasn't that supposed to go into a reserve fund?
It did. It did.
It did.
And it's brought back here. It's just a matter of how they move the numbers around in the report, but it's all right here. And so our surplus is this 379,834.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
Now, can I ask you a question? Some point in this, I don't have it written down what page, but there is reference to fiscal year 21 and how that, and basically going back to fiscal year 21 might somehow cast a different light on fiscal year 22. Is that ringing a bell?
I think you're probably talking about restatements. We had to do a few restatements to last year's beginning fund balances. And some of those had to do with some payables that weren't booked, a few receivables that were incorrect. There was a couple of cemetery CDs that hadn't been reported in last year's audit. And then there were some capital asset adjustments that we found when trying to reconcile capital assets.
Okay, so going forward, do we need to worry about what happened in 21?
Yeah.
And how much work is that going to be for our staff?
I think most of those things have been fixed now. So I don't think there's going to be any going back to 21 now. And as of 22, I don't expect any restatements to those numbers. Again, not 100% positive of that, but I'm not expecting anything. So I don't think there's going to be any additional responsibility or effect to your staff on that above and beyond the normal course of closing and getting ready for audit.
That's good. Roger.
Yes, so thank you. So first of all, thank you for your time. I know that fire management worked really hard to obtain your services, and so we're really appreciative to have you, and also hearing a little bit that you hope to work with our current management team in future years is also really encouraging. So thank you for that and your time. My question is sort of in the spirit of Martha's actually. So obviously one of the findings, one of the vulnerabilities, for example, was internal controls around our transfer station.
Yep.
And you can imagine that transfer station has operated, in the same way for several years, many years, right? And so, how concerned would we be that these internal controls weren't brought to our attention earlier? Some of this, as a management tool, in some ways, this is a relief to finally learn our vulnerabilities so we can begin to address them comprehensively. And so I guess my question in the spirit of Marcia's is, how concerned should we be about previous auditing efforts?
I guess I'm not sure exactly how to answer that. I'm not sure exactly why it wouldn't have been in the report. I know there is some controls. In other words, I think some of the landfill tickets or transfer station tickets are sold at the town. So you're already trying to gather some information there in your normal course of how you do receipts. My whole thing was making sure that no money was collected at the transfer station, because again, then you've got a separate set of controls that need to be in place. How do you account for all the activity? We've had issues with transfer stations. So for us, it's kind of a hot button topic. It's just something we want to make sure that if you're going to collect money at the transfer station, that there's a set of controls and processes in place to make sure that you have completeness of that revenue accounted for.
Okay, and then I have one more question, actually. And I think I should. So you had mentioned that you would attest to no conflicts and no confrontations with management with the audit, which is obviously wonderful for a board member to hear. However, we started this conversation with noting that it was a disclaimed audit because you couldn't obtain a signature from anyone in either a management position or in a financial officer position. So that is sad to me, of course, that we don't have that operation or ability to procure that signature for generalized statements or standardized statements. So I guess my question to you, and tell me if you can't answer this, how normal or is that? This strikes me as a unique situation. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, I will say that it's a unique situation in that I've had consultants who had to come in and operate as finance departments before, but I've never run into the situation where they wouldn't sign the client rep letter. And I think for your current finance director, who's again an outside consultant, her company wouldn't allow her to do it, obviously for some sort of legal reasons, my guess is. But I had not run into that, so we had to research what we had to do as far as the opinion goes on this. So that's where we ended up with the disclaimer of opinion, because that's what the standards dictate we have to do.
And then one follow-up, if I may.
Go ahead.
And then if, assuming that you were able to procure a signature on that letter, would you be in a position to offer one of the three opinions that you had outlined, either an adverse opinion or a qualified opinion? Or has your work on this audit completed, or have you completed the work for us regardless of whether or not you were to procure a signature?
Yeah, the audit work has been completed and it is now locked down. But yeah, like I said, I'm really hopeful that we can figure out how to deal with it for 23's audit, because obviously we're getting really close to that period already where we're getting toward the year end. So if we can figure out how the process will happen on your end to be able to get us the materials and incorporate somebody in there who, you know, is familiar with the materials, is willing to sign the rep letter, then I think we shouldn't have a problem for this year. But yes, if we had the representation letter signed, we would have been able to give you one, probably an unqualified opinion, my guess is. So.
Marsha, I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
To that. Thank you. Rick, what would be the ramifications of not having that letter? Do you think that this will affect our credit rating or our ability to get bonds or loans of any kind?
I do not believe so. I've not seen that with municipalities in the past. I obviously can't speak for bankers but I'd be very surprised if you had any issues with the bond bank or anything like that. But even if you went to the bond bank, by the time you did, you might have a 23 audit that, however said, and you have an opinion for. So I don't foresee it being a problem. But I can't speak for every banker or every vendor out there, you know, loan agent out there. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's just not something I've seen in the past. Even with qualified audit reports, I haven't seen that be an issue.
Great. I do have another question, Marsha, if I may.
You may.
in the letter about material and weaknesses and significant deficiencies, each time you, cite cause, the answer is unknown. Can you explain why we're getting that response?
That's pretty standard response for us related to the findings, because if we don't know what caused it, if we can't definitively identify the reasons for why it occurred, we just put unknown. And it's a format that the generally accepted accounting principles want you to put in. Normally, I would probably leave that out, but it's a format that we have to put it in. So we just leave that blank when we don't really have an answer as to why it happened, rather than trying to guess. And
Marcia, I do have a couple more questions.
Okay.
On page 26, you talk about compensated absences payable. And there were some payouts of a reduction of that, down at the very bottom there. Starting at 103,653, reductions at 41,630, but ending balance $62,023. We've recently had 2 people leave the employ of the town and take significant amounts of accumulated vacation time. Is that the 41,630? And the remaining 62,000 would be what is on the books for people who are still in the employ of the town?
yes. Now, and that could either be in the form of it was used, or the form of they received vested payout when they left. So either one of that 41,000 reduction could be in either cash or time taken.
Okay, and another question, what would you see as the appropriate level of debt for our town?
I really, again, I struggle to answer with that question, because every town has its, I go to a bunch of these, do a bunch of audits for municipalities throughout the whole year. Some towns have very little debt, and some towns have tons and tons of debt. It's really to the tolerance of the board, to the taxpayers. When I look at your debt schedule, the one thing I can safely say is I don't think it's overwhelming amount of debt. I mean, again, I know a lot of towns don't like to have any debt, and I get that, but when I look at your 1,460,000 compared to towns of your size, that's not a large debt load.
But I guess I would wonder, we're looking at some significant needs in the town. Would twice that amount be still acceptable in terms of, from your point of view?
Yes, I like I said, I think this is based on other municipalities I audit, this is a pretty low debt level where you're at right now.
Okay. And then my last question was going back to our Article 10 question. So if we can pursue that further at the appropriate moment.
Yeah, I think he's done what he can do. He said what he can say, I think, so we'll have to talk about it.
Well, I'm just wondering, what kind of fund would the ARPA money be in if it wasn't in a reserve fund? Would it be in a grant fund? Would it be in a special fund? What title would we put on it?
Usually it'd be like a special revenue fund, because it's driven by grant dollars.
Okay, thank you.
And I was kind of confused when I saw it, even though it's tagged as a reserve fund. I can't find the page now, but it's right up there along with the general fund. So it doesn't say reserve. What page is that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what were you asking?
It's page 7.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Rick, if this helps, this is Brian. My understanding from our finance director is that it's currently held in the special revenue fund, which is the appropriate place to put it related to the federal grant. So that,
Yes.
Again, I think the article that was voted for was to create a reserve fund, because there was no requirement to fund it with any amount of money. So that was, I guess, what led the board and myself to believe that maybe there wasn't a need to do an immediate revote to rescind it. There was no actual propriety that's occurred.
That's changed.
Yep.
Well, the article actually says, shall the voters establish a reserve fund to be called the ARPA Rescue Plan Act Special Reserve Fund to be used for this purpose of holding ARPA monies in accordance with 24 VSA 2804. So it's in a special reserve fund, and that's where it's supposed to be.
It's in a special revenue fund, I believe.
Special revenue rather than
That's the
special reserve.
difference.
Yeah, those are words I'm getting.
And the revenue, I guess, if I understand it, the federal guidelines don't want towns to just bank this money and put it into a rainy day fund indefinitely. They want towns to use this money for purposes related to the ARPA recovery, and that's why that preclusion is in the federal guidelines.
Okay, so it's in special revenue, which is where it should be. We voted to put it in a special reserve fund.
Yeah, sorry.
Roger, go ahead.
Because we have the benefit of this discussion last week. We voted to establish a reserve fund. We didn't vote mercifully to fund it. So that's why last week we said we do need to rescind this question to delete this reserve fund and a couple of other funds that need to be house kept. But that there was no immediacy, and we should, we talked a lot. I won't rehash all our discussion, but
Right.
I think now we all agree, and now auditor just has said in a public meeting that we agree on the fund.
As long as we leave it in the special revenue fund,
Yes.
we're okay.
Mercifully, it wasn't written fast and clearly, so we got off a little bit from it.
But Rick, I thought when we started this, you said it was in a reserve fund and it's reserve fund number 49. So that's part of my confusion. And the second part is, I'm just wondering, why is ARPA one of the 4 types of funds on page 7, if it's in a run-of-the-mill reserve fund or a run-of-the-mill special revenue fund? Why does it have private place on page 7?
Purely because of the size of the dollars. Basically, you have what we in the roll up of the accounting for the financial statements, you have major funds and you have non-major funds. The size of the ARPA fund made it a major fund, so we show it on the front of the financial statement. The rest of them are smaller in comparison to total dollars, and there's calculations that go into that, but those are all considered still the same kinds of funds. They're just in the back under either special revenue or capital project fund types.
Okay. And that's only half of the money. We've got another 500,000 plus. But so when we started the discussion, you said it was in a reserve fund, and it certainly looked like that on paper.
Well,
But
I'm
now-
saying, yes, it's in a reserve fund and how you guys count for it on your trial balances. But when we roll it up into the financials, it's basically a special revenue fund.
Okay, so should we do something on our trial balances to make it look like a special reserve fund as opposed to
Special revenue.
revenue fund? As opposed to reserve?
I don't think you need to do anything special to your trial balances. I think, to be honest with you, I think you guys are just struggling with a little bit with reserve versus the real, there's kinds of funds are capital projects, special revenue, permanent, and general fund. Those are your normal funds from a purely financial reporting level. How towns use them, how boards use them amongst their talking, they'll use rainy day funds, they'll use, like you said, a reserve fund or whatever, but those aren't technically the types of funds, if that makes sense.
It does. And I guess my final question is, all of this is from me telling us that we have to do a lot on our policies and our procedures. And so we're going to be talking about how we should proceed with that activity. And I'm just wondering, is this something that we could use your firm as almost sort of experts to, if we run into problems where we're not sure, we could come back and say, do you have an opinion about this in terms of the policy?
Absolutely. Be glad to do that. And I think I've already shared with your finance consultant examples of COSO control manuals that you guys could format after, accounting manuals that you guys could format after. What I'm really trying to do for you guys is get a lot of what you have in place. You have some pretty good practices and policies and stuff. There's just some stuff missing. And what I'm trying to do is get it all written so that we have everything that details exactly how policies and procedures are happening and how controls over disbursements, payroll, receipts are all functioning for the town, and it's all written, because your grantors want that now. They're very vigilant these days about looking at your policies to make sure they're in conformity with uniform guidance, and they're looking at your COSO manuals, which are your control manuals, to make sure they're written, that your controls are written and documented.
Great. So in terms of our process, should we look to you first and say, these are the things that you think are missing? Or should we, start working through based on what you've already been working with our management?
Yeah.
So they have.
I could go either way on that. Right now, you could start the process and then include us as you start going through it and have questions. Or if you want to, create a little group between Joyce and Brennan and kind of come with, okay, here's our ideas, and then we could meet and do phone conference calls. Be glad to do that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Does anyone on the board now have another question? Mary?
Just on the transfer station, now problem, that has been, that was brought up 2 town managers ago, but I'm not sure what the solution was, because it has come up in several other towns. Is there a mechanism that's commonly used? Or is it just another punch card, or is it a debit card, or what would you recommend if we'd like to, put that out there?
The sound on that was a little garbled, so I think I'm hearing your question as you're wondering what the best controls would be to have in place to make sure that you take care of the weakness related to transfer station. And I like to control the sale of transfer tickets right at the town office. I'd like to control the numbering sequence of the tickets so that you can account for it. And I wouldn't be collecting cash at the transfer station.
Okay.
Now, I know that people sometimes fight back on that because everybody who's going down there who wants to drop off their stuff and town office isn't open to sell me a ticket. I do get the pushback on it, but I have to go at it from a purely controls, safety kind of perspective.
Madam Chair, I think the problem is when people come and they want to get rid of a refrigerator or a mattress or some construction debris, and we charge for that, then the transfer station employees, maybe it's our manager out there, is collecting. He says, that refrigerator is $50, or that mattress is 20. That's the cash that's being collected that we don't really have a mechanism. And what I heard Mary saying might make some sense is in that maybe we create another card system where people buy a card that has maybe $100 on it or $50 on it, and it's all prepaid, and then the transfer station employee checks off $10 because they got rid of some construction or whatever, some small board.
Good thoughts.
But I think that's the real problem, is that we don't really know if somebody's going to bring a refrigerator or a mattress or a flexible system. So we need to find a way of accommodating that. So if we're going to have those kind of controls.
Sounds good. Priscilla, do you have any questions? No. All right. I'm looking to the audience. Cheryl Lindbergh, would you come up to the table?
Is this good? Can you hear me, Rick?
Yep.
Hi, Rick.
Hi there.
Hi. So I do have a couple thoughts. I just took notes while you were speaking, and Madam Chair, I'll just read them off. One thing that I think you're aware of is that towns are vote for a spending level, and that's what we're supposed to spend, and therefore we're not supposed to deficit spend. What came up the year before was that we had a large unassigned fund balance, and there was concern that we had too much in our unassigned fund balance. And that was the genesis of the 2 reserve funds for 750 and 110,000 being created. So I don't think anybody realized the impact on a budget when they came up with that recommendation. But that is how it's supposed to be then shown, according to what you're showing in the report.
Yes.
And what about our unassigned fund balance? Is that a concern in your opinion?
Again, I usually don't give opinion as far as amounts, because every place I go, it's a totally different board, totally different taxpayers. Some have really healthy fund balances, and some spend everything they get right down. They have very little fund balance every year. Just if they have it, they roll it forward and spend it the next year. So obviously, I think you've got a fairly healthy fund balance. Usually, I think a lot of the standards out there would say you'd want to have 25% of your budget in fund balance. That sometimes that's considered high. Some places, do as much as 10%. So again, I can't really specify as to what I would think you should be at, but I can tell you that there's wide ranges out there, and GASB has some recommendations that they would give you, but I don't usually give out recommendations on that. So
Okay, and GFOA does as well, and we do have a policy on it, but it was a desire to restrict the funds into reserve funds, which is under the control of the select board, as opposed to leaving it in unassigned. That's where the monies were coming from, was supposedly from the unassigned.
And and right now, again, you're right, Cheryl, but basically they're still in the unassigned because there's no purpose for the fund. It can't be a special revenue fund, or it can't be a capital project fund. So it gets rolled back up into general fund. And so it's still there. It's just, you can still track whatever you want to track in your NEMRIC accounting system. But when I roll it up, I have to roll it up according to the standards.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. One comment you made earlier, I would like to clarify, and I think you might agree. You said there were a couple of cemetery CDs missing. They were missing in last year's audit because the auditor forgot to include them.
I assume that's the case. I don't know how it happened. I'm not sure. I just know when I was trying to tie out to the town report for this year, I noticed that the CDs occurred and I couldn't find them in the audit last year. So I had to take those beginning balance, restate them, and put them on. How it happened, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, again, the prior audit by that same firm had the CDs there that was missed. And if you recall, the classification of the trustees funds and the cemetery funds were confused in last year's audit.
They were switched. Yep.
Right. So it was the result of the audit that brought forth the missing information and the need to restate last year's numbers.
Correct.
Okay, great. And then lastly, my question is, another article that we voted at town meeting was asking the voters to move money from the COVID staffing grant to the fire department equipment fund. Do you recall the COVID staffing grant during the audit work, and do you show a net amount in that we could look to in your report anywhere?
That does not ring any bells to me. So I'm not sure about the vote, and I'm not sure about that fund. That fund doesn't, like I said, you have a lot of small funds, but I don't remember there being that name. So I mean, I could look back through our records and get back to you directly, but I don't have any specific knowledge of that right now.
This was a COVID staffing grant through a grant with the state of Vermont.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Thank you.
Any other, Roger?
So one of the things we've heard from our auditor has talked about sort of the importance of getting transmittances from the state, either electronically or in paper copy, to their office, so they can properly, reconcile the books with, what comes from these entities. They're dependent, they're not addressed to the finance department. They would be presumably addressed to the town's treasurer. So there's an inherent relationship that exists. So in this work that Marcia alluded to, and how you might sort of advise or help us with our internal controls and the improvement of our policies, how, and in your experience, how often have you created a clear process for roles and responsibilities in that work?
I think that setting up those manuals, setting up those control processes and written documentation will help to clarify who's responsible for what, how the flow of information is going to go from receipt of information to getting it into the books. Obviously like I've even pointed out in my findings that, communication is an issue there. And I think some of it is, just people not knowing or people not knowing where things have to go in what timely fashion. So I think if we can get that written down and really establish a clear line of communication from all channels, board, treasurer, finance manager, if we can open up those lines of communication better, I really don't think we're going to have any more future problems like that.
I really value your yeah, so thank you.
Rick, in that regard, I had been looking at the VLCT's checklist for internal financial controls.
Yep.
And I'm going to be suggesting that a little subgroup of us work through that and use that as a jumping off point for making those decisions.
I think that's a great idea. I saw it in your packet and I was kind of reviewing it. I hadn't seen it in a while. I think that is a good jumping off point, but I also think of getting from Joyce the stuff that I sent down, the codes, just so you can kind of get a visual of what it would look like from the accounting manual standpoint or from the COSO control manual standpoint. I think that would be really helpful.
Great, we'll do that. All right, now I see a question. Stuart Richards, would you like to be recognized? You're on mute, I think. There you go.
Stuart Richards, Norwich. I'm looking at page 92 and at a line item entitled legal. I'll give you a minute to get there.
92 of the packet.
I can't tell you whether it's of the packet or what it's of. It says 92 of 195.
Oh, that's the packet. It's not the old.
Yeah,
So that's not.
We're not on that yet.
Right, that's really not a question, I think, for our auditor, because that was our fund balances. So you can ask that question when we get to fine details, I think.
Okay, well, whoever is able to answer the question, and I'd appreciate an answer. So what I see on that line item entitled legal is no charge actually for FY22 and FY22 actual. And then what I see is a jump in FY23 to $90,000. And the amount goes from 90,000 in FY23 approved to FY23 year to date, it's actually $134,000. So we've actually spent $134,839 if I'm reading across correctly. And to me, that's a very concerning number. I'd like to know specifically how that money was spent. And
I appreciate that. It's in this context, I don't think Rick can answer it. Can you?
No, I don't have that kind of detail. And to be honest with you, I couldn't quite get to the reference of where his numbers were coming from because I'm working off just the audit report, not your board packet.
Right.
so
Okay.
if this is a question that Rick can't answer, I certainly would appreciate Brennan chasing it down and providing that information. I think it's important information that the town ought to have. So thank you for, thank you for hearing me out, and thank you for chasing it down and providing the information.
Certainly. Is there anyone else that is with us remotely that has a question? I don't see anyone. Okay. Anyone else last chance for asking Rick a question? You too, Brennan?
No, I don't have any questions. No.
Okay. Well, Rick, thank you. This has been really helpful. And I personally am looking forward to accessing more expertise from you and your firm. And we just can't thank you enough.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate the time today. Look forward to working with you this year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you, Rick. Bye-bye. All right. Thank you, everyone. All right, now the next item on our agenda is the town manager's report. So, Brennan?
So what I think I'd like to do, I have a number of things to discuss. Most of them are human resources related regarding filling positions, and it's going to be a lengthy discussion, I feel. So knowing that we're an hour in right now after the audit report, I would honestly love it if we could hold potentially a special meeting and talk, in detail about some of the human resource ideas that I have. Some of it is probably going to involve moving some monies or transferring monies out of that unanticipated fund reserve, so that we have a better understanding of where we stand in different departments at this point in the year, and then some recommendations on making some movements, and then update on our attempts to hire some of our open positions. So that said, it's, I think, going to take quite a while to get through that and have a robust discussion about it. The other piece that I also would like to have discussed here, maybe we could add this as a second agenda item if there could be a special meeting next week, is the review of the last year's retention bonus. It was paid out as a cost of living adjustment. We've found, some inconsistencies there, I believe, with how that has been rolled out. And I just want to, before we make another payment out to folks, get this board's opinion on the proper way to do that. So again, if I could, I do have much to report, but I think it maybe is better done in a meeting specifically to that.
And that retention bonus payment would be due at the end of this month. So
yeah, the timing piece is that we're due to make our third payment out of that for full installment coming up here at the end of this month.
okay. I think that sounds reasonable. Board members, would you be willing to have a special meeting on the 29th next Wednesday?
Of course.
I think this is the second special meeting in 1 month of state board.
Mhm.
And everyone wants to march on, but we'll never have people who have jobs or families who would do this work if we set up a pattern of weekly meetings. So that being said, I'm available, but I think we should work to keep our agendas not have money.
I agree. I think though that we are at the start. Yeah. But I mean, I guess you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. And we're at the start of a basic rethink of a lot of things. And I think once we get ourselves organized, and this is part of that organization, we'll be able to go along regularly. One of the things that I think is going to be key is that we're going to have to do some division of labor so that we don't spend a lot of time in board meetings together, but we actually have maybe 2 people put together some work, which then goes back to the others, so that we use our time efficiently. But if we can stomach to get through this, and Roger, I understand, 25 years of working with kids, I understand. So what I would say to you is this, we would have a forum, or you could be remote.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think seeing the screen, seeing, how we're running this hybrid, that I think that's really encouraging for, some of these issues that we were talking about. So in the interest of time, I'll stop talking, but, Mary and I are also in collective bargaining. We had one meeting canceled mercifully, and we we got another meeting back for this, but that's okay, because as you said, we'll get there. So I'll stop talking, stop wasting our time.
I have a question for the chair of the Board of Listers. I have a notation on my calendar that the evening of the 29th, there is to be potentially be a presentation from the reappraisal firm. Has that been confirmed?
No. And in fact, we're gonna revisit that. I was gonna bring it up if I could tonight, but no.
Okay,
there is-
so I can take that off, and so I would be available on the 29th. Thank you.
Are you, you're not still a lister, you just wanted to attend.
Well, it was, I didn't want to create a conflict. I know Cheryl likes to attend some of our, all of our meetings, and so, yeah, as treasurer and as chair of the Board of Listers, that would put her in two places at once.
Right. I mean, we could consider a Tuesday or a Thursday, I suppose.
She says the 29th is clear, so I'm good.
Okay, Wednesday the 29th, special meeting, 6:30, and we will not go longer than 2 hours, period.
Now, Marcia, we may hold you to that.
You know.
I would just, as a special meeting, it might be possible to move it earlier in the evening, 6, as we have done in the past as well, or
Yeah,
do we have other?
I think Roger has some time.
6:30's a stretch for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so is that the end of your report?
That's the end of our report for today.
All right, so that's it. Yeah.
I've been holding off on a bunch of things, but as somebody so new to this, I have sort of a little mental list of things I'd really like to be brought up to date on, which would have to be probably an open meeting or in a warrant meeting. And I haven't, sent a note saying, could somebody please bring me up to date on like the open meeting law too? Or I have no idea what the collective bargaining is all about. I mean, I just don't know. And these are things that I really like to come up to speed on, but they take time, and I don't know how I feel as though we have an enormous list of things to get through.
And I apologize to you, Priscilla, because at one point I had suggested that what we could do is have like a piece of our agenda, which was just questions from new board members, so we could answer those. That doesn't help you when it's things like the collective bargaining.
No,
But I think that what we have done, we did it not so long ago, and it might be time to do it again soon. To just have a executive session so we can be brought up to date on that. And similarly with the lawsuit, things like that, we could do an executive session for.
but it's just, yet another evening and more of everybody else's time.
Right. Right. But Mary, did you have something to add?
Just that I think sometimes we've also, at the beginning of a term, kind of game plan meeting. We have so many things on our plate. I think we're going to need, not only the teams, but timelines that are going to be tight. But there's a lot of stuff we have to get done before we're back in the budget season.
There's only 12 meetings unless you have special meetings.
We talked, was it last week? I'm losing track, I guess, about we need to get a study going to reassess all our personnel policies and where people are in their fund, on their pay grades and stuff. Like,
That's coming right up.
okay.
We're going to start talking about how we're going to talk about that tonight. Okay. All right. Item 5 is our finance report. Our finance income director is not here, as we know. And so I guess we can sort of, if anybody has questions, we can see if there's an answer. I know I was just looking at a couple of things. On page 93, there seems to be computer equipment. Didn't seem to have been budgeted and then was overspent, and I wondered why we didn't do that. I also wondered on page 94 of the packet, the community policing, speed signs, etc., were over budget by over 300%. Yet I heard from a resident the other day that the sign for Beaver Meadow Road never went up, and just the speed signs. So I'm wondering if we had 3 of them approved. I was wondering if we could find out where they are and if they're up. And then the other one was about ARPA, but that's been answered. Does anybody else have any questions, Pam?
On those speed signs, they were ordered last August, they were delivered in October. Just about the time we had a change in management, so they're, as far as I know, they're sitting in storage and it got to the point where they couldn't be installed because the ground is frozen.
Right.
So we're gonna have to wait until the ground is soft enough for them to put them in and determine where they go. I don't know that we ever had a plan.
And I think Chris Kaufman and Rita CEO of TRORC were going to have a conversation about their placement when the ground.
So we bought them last fall, but didn't get them put in, and we didn't really have a plan for where they would go. I think Beaver Meadow was expecting one of those signs, but where the other two go, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, that's perfect.
One thing I would like to note about this finance report is, once again, it doesn't have a date, well, it has a date, February 2023, but there's no signature. And there are two other reports from department heads that are not signed by the department head. And I find that irritating. That's my personal thing.
I've mentioned that in the past too, so it would be good if we could have.
It's accountability. Take ownership of your report.
Well, I think of it as historical. It's nice to be able to look back and say, you know, especially like the staff is changing.
I mean,
Who was here?
they have been.
Okay.
The other thing is, I noticed I submitted a report to the packet, which is on the pages 1 through 19. In a totally different format from what we're getting from the finance director. And there are a lot of differences in some of the information. Like when I look at the report that I asked the treasurer to print for me, there are no budget numbers for all the revenue. But then when I look at you, I don't know, I don't have the tab, I have it printed out.
Right.
But when I look at the report from the finance director, I see FY22 budget, FY22 actual, and I see, then I see 23. And there are revenue numbers in here, so I'm trying to figure out why one report has revenue numbers and one doesn't. I don't know how we can have them in one place and not the other. I know this report that I've gotten from the treasurer came from NEMR. I'd like to know, did the report from the finance office come from NEMR or some other source?
Well, I don't know. We can find that out. And in my experience, many reporting tools allow you to choose what data you're looking for.
But how can we have budget numbers in one document and not the other if they came from the same place?
So
Roger.
first of all, like I use the reports that I've provided to the board in a packet. So I can't speak to or have any knowledge of some report that you procured elsewhere.
It's in the
And
packet.
then-
It's in the packet.
So you submitted this report that you had shown for you.
I did, and I submitted it, and it's in the packet.
So I think like what is it? So you just question, like, what is the problem I have, I guess?
I'm confused as to how we can have two reports that come to the same conclusion, but one doesn't have budget numbers for revenue and the other one does.
Well, I don't know anything
Is
about.
this a spreadsheet and this is number? I don't know.
Well, and what I'm sort of speculating is, various databases have different ways of reporting. And it could be that she's not asking for the same things that, you can report in there may be reports that you can do yourself. I think all we need to do right now is, ask her those questions and then we can maybe pick this up at another time.
Because if that is coming from a different source, I think we need to stay with the official books of the town, which is NEMR. That should be our Bible when it comes to our finances. If this is an Excel spreadsheet or some other source, we should abandon that.
Well, people can take data from a source, database and put it into Excel and it's still legitimate. But I think, that's maybe not a discussion for tonight. We should talk to her and find out what she's doing, and then we can have that discussion. We can put it on another agenda.
Okay,
Right, and I think like also it's just importantly, this goes to a heart of an HR problem. It's like, I want to use reports that are provided to me from the finance director that is sent to the town manager, that is put into the packet for my consideration. Like, so I'm making it like, that is what I'm saying. So regardless of like the differences in the report and what report should be used, I don't want to weigh in on that. I want to have our management team make the decision about what report I need to review. So that's my rhetorical point. And then we should not.
Right. I do have some other questions in the report, if I may. Looking at the town clerk, the health insurance, we have 2 employees there who've been fully covered by health insurance. And yet we only have $2,489 of expense for 8 months. I think there's something wrong in some of these health insurance things. Same thing under the rec department. Some departments are low because we haven't been staffed, like planning. That makes sense. But the rec department, we've been fully staffed with our 1 employee. Town clerk's office, we've been fully staffed with 2 employees. And so I just wonder what's going on with some of these numbers.
Well, I think, Brennan, if you agree, I would like to see, communication is what we're talking about here. And I think, Pam, you need to talk to Joyce, and find out, if you don't get the right answers, then let us know. I think we're the wrong body. It's good that you're telling us that you're seeing that there's a problem in inconsistency, but we can't answer the questions. So I think it would be good if you ask Joyce the question. And then if you don't get the answers that make sense to you, by all means, we'll talk about it and find out why.
Okay, one further question, if I may. I see in the appropriations, we're in month 8 and we've only paid 50% of some of our appropriation payments. I'm wondering when the balance of those will be paid, since we're getting down toward the 4th quarter here.
Well, if she was here, she could tell us, but we don't know because she's not here. So
I just wonder what, historically, when are these payments made? I would think they'd be made like early when we collect taxes, and then again when we collect the second batch of taxes, which would be February. I would have hoped to see that once we get the money in the door, that these appropriations would be fully funded.
Right. Right.
So just a point of clarification. So yeah, it's like very clear question. I would say, Martha, it's best if you reach out to Joyce correctly. I would suggest that the appropriate thing to do is to put in writing your questions to our friend and our town
I
manager,
agree.
who would have a conversation with Joyce.
I agree. I will do that.
Yeah, so.
However, I just want to, I don't like telephone chat. So,
It's
and I
not
don't,
cheap, man.
right. I know it's chain of command, but I also think that sometimes things are lost in translation. So as much as people can go to the source, respecting.
I will write an email.
Yeah.
So that my questions are clear.
Okay. And then I would just say, in my last job, I was always the one to make a report that was my own report. I didn't like hand reports. So I fully respect wanting to look at the data in different ways, because sometimes we absolutely find errors. But I think address it first with her, and then, let us know if you see problems, because you have a good eye for this.
I just asked the treasurer for this report because it's much simpler, easier to look at, and focused on the budget, the year-to-date, and the percent, and the other report has a lot of columns in that I just find irrelevant and distracting.
Okay. Good. All right. So now I would like to turn our attention, if I could, to the receipt of correspondence policy. And full disclosure, I did this traveling in the car this weekend. So if anybody sees a problem, I want you to speak up, because I was trying to follow my notes. Go ahead, Mary.
I think it's workable, except of actually doing it. For instance, our responses that I think need to be sort of immediate. We're going to respond as a board in this proposal informational needing no response, information needing delegated response, or information which should be incorporated into an existing agenda item or a future agenda item. I think that's fair, but in making the decision, we have to be very sort of snappy about doing that. Maybe even say, well, how many think informational, but even do it as a way of thought vote in order for this not to take a lot and lots of our time. And often this comes up right at the beginning when we have lots of energy that we could devote to actual problem solving rather than tangential thinking, which is good for future agenda items, it's good for things we overlook, and it's good for new issues. But if we have to start thinking tangential and then there's certain stuff we have to get done, we can get kind of worn out with it. So I think the way that we do this will really matter if we adopt this, just the way we respond to correspondence and make quick decisions about what buckets they need to be in.
So is there any particular phrase, word, sentence, paragraph that you can change?
I think that, I think a lot of times, you know, you have a really good plan, but how you execute the plan is not always something that you would put in writing. Right? I mean, I don't know, cookies or something like that, you've got a recipe, but how fast you do it, how, where, you know, how you're finding all the ingredients, where the pan, what's the oven temperature, all of that. That's execution, and I don't think that really goes into a policy. I think I'm talking about the execution of it. I think we can do, and I think we've got a great board that can be a good team to do that, but I think we'll just have to stay on top of that if we're gonna adopt this. That's all. Okay. Question?
The last sentence, all correspondence not requiring separate action receiving one motion. Is that?
We talked about that last week and we talked about not doing, like separating the consent agenda, but we didn't make a decision. And this, I think, was from the
Yeah.
old.
So this being in my mind. It's just like I move to accept all correspondence. It's sort of, so kind of like, I wonder if like that sentence, a policy sentence, sort of allows the provision to sort of disregard the outline process.
Get rid of it.
So I think it goes against the intention of everything before it.
Yeah,
That is fair. I looked at the minutes and we actually approved this policy and you were to come to us tonight with the changes that we approved last week. So if we're, I think we have an issue here that this is approved. So are we making changes again?
I think so. Pam, is it approved? Is that the changes done as approved? In
In the minutes, I believe it said that we approved it.
Oh, yeah. To Pam's point, we kept the note from that and somehow we managed to bake in the inconsistency in what we were on. So, yeah.
Leighton moved, second by Smith, to adopt the procedures concerning correspondence as amended. Motion passed unanimously.
And my notes have that we kept the 1, 2, 3, and we also kept this other piece, all correspondence not requiring action. So we actually passed it with the inconsistency.
So we could,
And that was my concern when I said, if we're gonna do this, we have to do it. If we're gonna put it in writing, we have to do it.
would anyone like to make a motion to amend the previously approved procedure for receipt of resident correspondence?
You have a motion for consideration, technically, too. Or no, that was that last meeting that we did this. No, the 8th, right?
Was the 8th.
Okay.
This was not, we shouldn't take too much time, but we should just decide. Do we want to get rid of that sentence? And if so, I think we have to, maybe vote to rescind our previous approval and then vote to approve the amended procedures without that particular last one.
I think that makes sense.
And Marcia, if I may, so we had a couple of thoughts that were on at the top as well about the
Oh, right.
submission deadlines that we never started to talk about as well.
So, Brandon, go.
So the other thing, actually, Maria Cal, this is the one who puts through the correspondence. And one of the thoughts was, for the regular meetings, we're asking the submissions coming by noon on Thursday, which is what we talked about. So they go out in the packet, which is time to do that. And then we're adding to that, meetings, four business days or 4 days prior to a special meeting for the packet is produced. So I guess the question became is for a special meeting, are we actually going to be taking correspondence unrelated to potentially what that special meeting is about, which is usually a special simple topic? And then is that kind of dilute the focus on that? So that would be one question. And then if we were going to say, yeah, we are going to still accept correspondence for special meetings, just defining that 4 days is actually maybe 4 business days. And her other suggestion was for which a packet is produced. So if there's no packet for the special meeting, obviously that would be kind of nullified.
So basically, what they're saying is to take the second paragraph and put a period after meeting, Wednesday meeting.
Yeah.
And just strike the part of special meeting.
Right. Just wanted to do kind of twice a month.
Right.
Do this
Just a regular.
but not on a special meeting.
I would know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we would just cross out or 4 days prior to a special meeting. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to suggest that people submit when they submit, and if there's something that the chair feels is appropriate to the agenda, that it be incorporated, but if it's not appropriate to that special meeting agenda, then it waits for the next regular meeting.
So you think we should have a packet for special meetings?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if something came in that you felt was germane to the special meeting agenda, then it should be sent out to everyone. If it's not germane, it waits to the next regular meeting.
In practice, we do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't think we need it. I think for the reasons of personnel and administrative burdens, I think we should consider putting the period. And then, yeah, Marcia is right. I think in practice, Marcia or Miranda has sort of done just that. This will be published in this packet, but you should see this.
And she's very good about contacting the chair and saying, this just came in and it's appropriate.
Okay. I did send her a correction to the minutes, and she did send me back a receipt saying that she got it and what packet it would go in. So she is following that procedure. So, all right, just I needed that clarification. If it's already happening, then we don't need to put it in here. Then I would make a motion that we amend the receipt of correspondence policy.
To remove 4 days prior to a special meeting and final sentence.
Are those the only changes that we need? If that's the case, then I will make that motion, yes. But we take out
that was all.
4 days prior to the special meeting, and that we take out the last sentence of all correspondence being received in one motion. So that's my motion, to amend this policy with those 2 changes.
I will second it.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes.
That's why again, what's that motion?
Yes,
I'll give it to you.
Okay.
Pam will provide the details. Thank you, Pam. All right. Let's see, we are now on action items for motions, and it is 8 o'clock. So this is going to take a little bit of time. Does anybody need a 5-minute stretch or 10-minute break? Mary, 5 minutes would be welcome. 5-minute break. Reconvene at 8:05. That's a little fast, I think.
Yeah. That's just, Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
We're back in session. It's 8:07, it's the Norwich Selectboard, and we are
This would be, okay, good.
item 7, which is the rules of conduct and regular and special meeting. The rules of conduct of regular and special meetings of the select board, if I can read that. I drafted this using the VLCT model rules with some amendments. John Carroll recommended inclusion of statutes, which I incorporated by reference at the beginning of the document with a stipulation that copies of the statutes would be available at the physical location of our meetings and on our website. Further to our agreement, this board's agreement, I then passed the draft to Pam Smith for her comments, which are attached on page 123 of the packet that came to us also via an email. So, with that as a beginning, who would like to begin the discussion? Mary,
There's no way to put that on the screen, is there?
that's a good idea, I think. Am I
On
a,
that screen, on this one.
am I
What's
a,
the charter with that?
am I a co-host?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me see if I can find it and put it up here. What page did I say? 125 or something.
So
Yes, I did it.
yes, okay, because it's not called the same thing as what it's called in the agenda.
It is
Select
not.
board rules of procedure.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, let's see.
I didn't have that.
no,
You're at 120, but you got.
I got 120. I just want to be careful about
Rules
putting
of
this
conduct,
on.
yeah.
Bear with me. Okay, there they are. Yeah. Let's see. Is that better?
Yeah. I'm gonna not want to have a breakdown of this. I was a little confused about what would actually be.
Okay, so the statutory authority is just, where I'm noting what actually is in the statutes that pertains to, you know, what's business, what's deliberations, what's a meeting, all that kind of stuff. Executive sessions, what do you do if you violate those? Public records, and how do you manage public records? And that goes to what we can talk about in a executive session, for example. And then I prefaced the language that I was using because this is actually coming from the VLCT and they use public body or body a lot. And I didn't want, sometimes I think select board's a little bit clunky. So I just left it in there. And I only capitalized select board when it was used with the word Norwich. Organization, so basically this is just when we're going to elect a chair, that the chair is going to preserve order. Number 2, at all times, members will be respectful to each other and to the public. Now, I want to make it clear that nobody can legislate what is civility and what is respectful. But as a famous Supreme Court judge once said about, it was about pornography or something, and we know when we see it. So I think the same goes with respect and
that's quite the analogy.
Minutes are gonna be great this week.
A majority of the members shall constitute a quorum. I'm hitting the highlights here.
Yeah.
Number 4.
So a lot of it's based on the news.
Yes, most of it. All right. Let's see. Any member can request a roll call vote. When one or more members attend a meeting electronically, a roll call vote is required according to that particular statute that comes from the VLCT.
Did you eliminate these? authority to represent on behalf.
Where there was a question, I made a decision, so that's what we should look at. Right, so no single member shall have authority to represent. Number 4 is that.
That's an important one. I mean, it's just in the VLCT.
Yeah. I think it's still in here, but let me find it.
It's also in the statute.
Right.
But can you see it in this?
Number 4.
Is it in there?
Yeah.
There
On
it
your
is.
draft. On your draft.
Right, so you're just skipping one.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm skipping.
Now, okay. May I interrupt a little bit?
Absolutely.
So I'm noticing in the VLCT, template that there are, decisions, options. So, and we just sort of have this,
Mhm.
for instance, motions made by members of the body. We generally require a second.
So that's what I put in there.
Okay, so you did for that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, those are decisions that need to be made by people.
Yeah.
So you did that and I agree with it, and I assume everyone else does too.
But let's check because you've got them highlighted. So
Right.
go through.
So do you require a second?
Mhm.
The limit to the number of times a member may speak to a question.
I said there's no limit. What do you think?
I think you should just delete the sentence.
You said what?
Just delete that first sentence.
Just delete, there's no limit to the number of times?
Yeah, don't,
Just take it out of it.
yeah, don't say that there's no limit, but don't say there's a limit either.
Or does anybody else feel?
I'd be okay with that.
I don't know why we can't leave it in.
I can go either way.
Guess you could ask why is it in there?
Well, I suppose because somebody might say, some chair might say, okay, you said enough.
And we also limit what the public can do. So we need to make sure that everybody understands that the board has the responsibility of deliberation. And therefore, people may feel that they need to say something a number of times and not feel like they're being cut off.
So are you saying keep it in or?
I have no problem leaving it in.
And can't the chair say, we've heard enough from you, even to another member of the select board, or just not recognize?
Well, yeah, you could, but this is basically saying there's no limit to the number of times a member can speak to a question. So a chair wouldn't be able to cut off somebody necessarily. I mean, I say in the preface remarks always, don't repeat yourself, basically.
Right.
But I think I think that the chair has general authority over the meeting. Authority is not the right word, but you know what I mean. But then we also have the ability to overrule the chair, right? So if I'm making my point repeatedly.
Sure we do.
The majority of the board can overrule the chair's decision about an action meeting. So if you say silent Roger, I can just get, my colleagues here to say, no, you can silent chair.
You got the mother look though, Roger, you got the mother look.
I think that's right. That I think a chair can be overruled with the majority vote of the board. So I think there's general deference to the chair, and we know that we can overrule the chair. But generally the chair is telling you to settle down for a reason, right? That's their job.
So we're having a discussion about this. Just show of hands, who wants it in, who wants it out?
Which one are you asking?
The first sentence of number 6, there is no limit to the number of times a member of the body can speak to a question.
Where are you asking then?
Yeah. Do you want it
Who wants it
in the procedures or out? In. One in. And
I have no preference.
no preference.
I say now.
It's out.
Yeah.
Mary says,
I think, actually,
okay, we'll go out.
okay, I'll strike that.
Yeah, if somebody feels strongly, I'm fine with that.
Okay. And then there's more to this than this one.
Yeah. I can't do it there. You're doing it.
That is, different.
Yes, I wanted to make my own notes, but I can't on this one.
Okay.
So you're gonna keep those.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Number 7.
Wait a minute, 6 or not, number 6.
Oh, okay.
So there's a member may speak or make a motion only after or without being recognized by the chair. And I think we've been trying to be recognized
This
by the
is,
chair.
I put in only after being recognized by the chair.
Okay, and I agree with that.
And anybody speak up if you don't agree with it. Because what we're doing is going through the VLCT model rules, and where it says you can choose to go one way or the other, in or out or whatever. I made a choice
For that
so-
one,
for
okay.
that one, and so you all need, Mary's gonna read it, the option. I'll tell you what's in here, and then we can decide if we want to keep it the way it is or change it.
You want to do it for that one? The member may speak or make a motion. Only after being recognized by the chair is what you put in, right? So we could have without being recognized by the chair, but I kind of like the decorum.
I like the
And
decorum.
it slows it down.
It's otherwise it's anarchy.
It can be anarchy.
Confusing at the least.
Yes.
Nothing we do is anarchy, I assure you.
Motions to close or limit debate.
Sometimes
That's good.
I have will be entertained.
Okay, you guys, that's good with that one? All right,
You have my comments.
right, well, I discuss with Pam. 7 didn't have those. Did you keep 7?
I did, any member provided me request a roll call vote,
Okay,
and that, it's required if at least one person is not with us.
all right. And non-unanimous.
Yeah,
votes. Okay. It's maybe reset the time for certain, I didn't have a choice, it was it. These rules may be amended by unanimous, 2/3 or majority vote of the body,
I wrote amended by majority vote.
which is what we've been doing. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Yeah, Roger?
so what about codifying something about like an unreasonable amount of discussion? So the spirit of, so I think like sometimes I think we maybe discuss an issue that just needs to be like tabled and brought up again.
Well, we've got that in number 6. Well, that's motions.
Right, so I think, so in other words, so I think the chair directs the meeting and we sort of, decide with their assistants when to move on from that agenda item. Do we, and I think that's the hardest thing about the job. Some people are successful at it than others, right? Like, it's real, but do we want to provide an assistance to that role by saying, limiting a discussion of a certain item after a period of time? Do we want to say no agenda item may go longer than, for instance? I don't know how practical that would be, but I think that would be, that might be something we want to do.
Mary?
So, when we just sort of say this, let's call a question, I don't think that's really what that is. I think what that is if the, when we say, oh, let's call a question, it just means that we're ready to vote, right? But I don't think that's what that means under maybe government rules, because I think you can have a vote to call the question. In other words, maybe a majority, if you voted, would say, I think we've talked about this enough.
Right.
But when you call a question, then you vote to cut it off.
But
I think it's a 6 set from last time.
right, motions to close or limit debate will be
It'll be
entertained.
okay, so it's covered under that,
I
right?
guess so.
Yeah.
Agenda,
Agenda,
just be nice about it too, like
Yeah,
that.
I know, just,
all right, so agendas, okay. Each regular and special meeting of the body shall have an agenda. I'm skipping words a little bit. The meeting time allotted for each item of business to be considered, those who wish to be added to the meeting agenda shall contact the select board through its email address. And there it is, which is monitored by the county manager's office to request inclusion on the agenda. The chair shall determine the final content of the agenda with input from the town manager's office and majority support of the board. I think I changed that from what was in there.
And I had the suggestion there that we create a distribution list for selectboard.norwich.bt.us. And the reason I made that suggestion is we've been doing it successfully in the lister's office. And I know probably about 4 years ago, I wrote to selectboard@norwich.bt.us making the assumption that there was a distribution, and when I came to the meeting afterward and asked about my topic, I was told none of the select board members had received my email. So I feel like this is something that can easily be done. CCI did it for the listers, they can do it for the select board, and that way our residents feel like they're really communicating with us, not the town manager, and us waiting for the town manager's office to communicate with us. And maybe things slip through the cracks.
I see the point. I'm just a little worried about the possibility of an open meeting law problem because it's really easy to apply to all. And so I think that is kind of what worries me. I mean, I guess I wouldn't have a problem if we made it like the select board, right now it's monitored just by Miranda, right? I mean, it could go, I don't know, Brennan wants his inbox filled up with more stuff, but it could go to the chair, like current chair of the board as well. So that, now the board has notice and if the chair doesn't see it in the packet or something. But I kind of worry, what does everybody else do? If we had everybody get it,
Yeah, what, I'm sorry.
whatever is sent to selectboard.us.
Oh, I definitely don't want that.
I don't need it.
I like the current system.
We do it in the lister's office. It's not a problem for open meeting law violation. We're informed and then the chair typically responds to whatever the resident request is, whether it's, on property record card or what's going on.
I think you've
At
got,
boundary lines or whatever.
you've got the benefit of fewer people and,
Your correspondence.
a more, well, I don't know about the correspondence, but it might be with a more limited scope of correspondence. I mean, ours could be about, what. So I wouldn't be opposed to the chair getting the two, just so that we know that there's no excuse, the board.
So then you can check with Miranda and make sure that what you received, she received and it's in the packet.
Yeah.
I could live with that.
And presumably it's Miranda who acknowledges receipt of correspondence.
Right?
Yes.
So on this, where it had the little choice list, chair, municipal manager, municipal administrator, municipal clerk. So if you took off clerk, you'd have the chair, you'd have Brennan, you'd have Miranda, right? And because, I mean, some of the things on the agenda would come through the manager, right? Like
Yeah.
just even internally.
Yeah, the way I had structured this was, those who wish to be added to the meeting agenda shall contact the select board through its email address, select board, which is monitored by the town manager's office, to request inclusion on the agenda. The chair shall determine the final content, blah, 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 with, town manager.
It's our current, it's kind of our current.
It's our current, no change.
I think it works. Not this, but it works, right?
Yeah,
Well, if I could, so I think the process is, if there's anything in doubt of should this or shouldn't this go on the agenda, it's already occurring when Miranda is asking probably me and then we're asking Marcia as the chair of the board, should this be something added to the agenda? So I think, again, if Marcia gets it at the same time that it comes into Miranda, that might be fine too, but the process would be about the same.
Right. That's been the process for years, as far as I know.
yeah. So, I mean, I'm happy to do that. We can try it, see how it works.
Or what?
Just making me get the select board stuff too.
Adding the chair as a recipient.
Yeah, adding, yeah. Where is this on there?
It's on, oh, sorry.
Was it-
Well,
It's right there, number one.
Okay.
Doesn't that doesn't
I
that
mean-
compromise the spirit of whatever, where is it? It says no single member of the body shall have, number 4. I mean, look, like, if Marcia wants more correspondence sent directly to her, like, all the power in the world. But, that being said, no single member of the body shall have authority to represent or act. I mean,
It
if
takes a
I
vote,
get,
it takes a vote of the board, and if we vote to do this,
Yeah.
then she has.
I also think it takes a lot of discipline and also a lot of stress to get in all of that correspondence directly.
Well,
So I think
had it worse in my last job, but.
look, like
But what do we see as correspondence in the packet? Maybe 5 or 6?
What?
How much correspondence is actually coming to Miranda to go in the packet? 5 or 6 emails?
It depends on the week.
why do you want to do this, Pam? I forgot your reason.
Because I have had the experience of my correspondence not being distributed to the select board, and it wasn't in the next packet. And the select board had never heard of my concern.
And has this happened several times, like more than seven, like?
I
more than
stopped sending
twice?
to select board at norwich.bt.us and started sending to each individual email address because I felt like the other way just wasn't working. And I wasn't willing to take that risk again.
Okay.
Well,
I had a bad experience and so
Yeah.
I learned from it.
right. I mean, I haven't had anybody complain that
Right.
that happened, but I'm sure it happened to you, but I haven't heard it lately. So, I mean, I guess the one thing that Miranda and I had talked about, and which we started doing before you came, was I was going in and looking at what was going in the packet beforehand. And we talked about doing that again, so I could certainly do that. And, I mean,
But I think as Brennan said, what happens and what my experience was and what your experience is you generally know about correspondence as you're setting the agenda, particularly if it's like a difficult correspondence, the town manager usually brings it to your attention. So I think in terms of like the chair receiving, notification about it, they do. So
Yeah.
so I think it's just a choice. I think it's really a choice of the chair if they want to opt to have these messages sent to them. And I think it would be generous of us not to require that in policy of the chair.
Right, but if we look at the volume of emails that go to the assistant to the town manager, there is the risk that something could slip through the cracks.
yeah, I mean, theoretically there is, but I think from what I've experienced, how these two work together, Brennan and Miranda are constantly communicating. I mean, sitting right next to each other. And then Brennan is always picking up the phone, not every 5 minutes, but he calls me when he needs to call me. Or says, we need to talk about this, something, has come in. And we always talk before the agenda to make sure, and I always say, well, what's new? So I've seen it working pretty well.
I'm still waiting for a response to 2 emails that I've sent to the assistant that over the last 2 weeks, and there's been no response.
But that was directly to the assistant.
Right. So I don't know if they slipped through the cracks.
If I may, so I think there's a difference between what we're talking about here,
Right.
with something being.
And I'm just talking about the volume.
There's a large volume of information that comes through, that gets filtered and disseminated, and that's, some of these questions are difficult to answer or they're complex and maybe don't have an immediate answer as well. So, I mean, to the point here, it's how do we want to have items come in that might go onto the agenda, I think is what we're talking about, not Miranda, can you help me with this? Or Miranda, I have a question about that. So I just want to clarify that too.
Yeah, and I think no matter what you try and do, there's nothing fail-safe because I could be hit by the proverbial bus. And, it goes through the cracks anyway, because Mary is my alternate and she wasn't hit by the bus. She's not on, right? So, I mean, I just maybe am leaning towards leaving it as it is.
Okay.
And then, but if something comes up, I mean, what does anybody else think?
I agree to leave it.
I think leaving it.
I'm willing to leave it as is. I'm sorry, I can't tell.
No.
Lots of experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we have any issues, then we can revisit.
Yes, you know,
Yeah.
truth is up. It's easy enough to change. Okay, the chair, we already went through the last sentence. Number two, I have left some blanks here. At least 48 hours prior to the regular meeting, and at least 24 hours prior to a special meeting, a meeting agenda shall be posted in the municipal office and on the following websites: the Town of Norwich Agenda tab, I left that blank to be filled in for a link, and the Norwich Lister. The agenda must also be made available to any person who requests such agenda prior to the meeting. Is that sufficient?
I would delete Norwich search. It happens by practice, but I wouldn't require it in policy.
Oh,
I would say required to post it in the public meeting place, and then we're required to post it on our website and everything else. The town mailing list or the listserv is a courtesy. People should not wait for a listserv notification to get their government's agenda.
This whole technology, it just went up on the bulletin boards.
Right.
We've gotten spoiled.
So the model policy says location of at least 2 public places. I don't know if we do that.
We do the post office and the bulletin board up front, and I think Tommy's bulletin board. 3. Okay. Madam Chair, I did have some suggestions on that section. No mention is made of the packet and the deadline for the packet in that particular section on the agenda.
That's right.
So I'm wondering if that's something that we wanted to add.
Packets, as I understand it, are not required by law.
Right.
We do it by practice.
Okay.
So, I mean, Mary, what do you think?
I'm not sure about whether it put it in writing. I mean, it has been our practice. It was not our practice when I first came in the form. There was zero packet, and I don't think possibly the agendas might have been posted in paper in the different places, but I don't think it was even on the list. So it was much more closed. And I think our effort was to open it up to people. So I think it's a good trend. And I'm not sure whether it should be in our rules of procedure.
Well, I think since COVID has had this effect on all of us, where we rely a lot more than we used to on sort of remote communication. In my case, the listserv particularly, and also, I mean, I think the postings on the listserv and the complete packets have been, it seems to me, greatly more accessible in the last, I don't know, 6 months or something, but I never paid any attention to any of this stuff until, because it always seemed like such a pain in the neck. So I didn't bother until dear old Stand Up for Norwich, made it so easy. They'd say, here's the packet, here's the agenda, here's the Zoom address. And I'm like, oh, I don't have to keep a listserv for several days or whatever. And so I began exclusively paying attention to that because it was easier than anything else. And now, the listserv is fine. But I just think if we want engagement, which I hope we do, make it as easy as possible. So I'm a big fan of listserv.
Well, I think we would still continue to do it. It's just whether we codify it.
Right.
And the other thing is, as we've seen lately, they changed their listserv, divided into 3 sections.
Not the town one.
Not Norwich, only Upper Valley.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I've always been a little weary of posting things for like links because we have to keep checking the links because they break. So that's my only worry. Hopefully the separate agendas happen. Yes.
I have brought these up as things for us to think about and discuss, and I'm happy to not include some of these things as long as we, just talk about them and make the decision as a group. I'm not wedded to any of these being in the procedures. I'm not taking a hard line. I just wanted us to have think about these things and discuss them.
Sounds good. All right, so, shall we take out the Norwich listserv and leave it in?
I obviously go to leave it in.
Okay.
I would leave it in because I think it's the best alternative at the moment.
Okay. I'll go with that and we'll move on. The agenda must be made available to any person who requests an agenda prior to the meeting. All business shall be conducted in this is number 3. All business shall be conducted in the same order as it appears on the noticed agenda, except that any addition to or deletion from the noticed agenda must be made as the first act of the business of the meeting. That's what we do now. No additions or deletions from the agenda shall be considered once the first act of business at the meeting has commenced. Any other adjustment to the notice agenda, for example, changing the order of business, postponing or tabling actions, may be made by a majority vote of the body. Any problems?
Do we have an open meeting law problem if we decide to add something to an agenda that wasn't previously posted until you show up at the meeting?
We're meeting in the open and we're allowed to change.
Okay, so something could be added.
Well, at the beginning.
Right, first thing.
We're trying not to, you know.
Right. It tends to be like, we don't have much choice. Right.
This is,
Yeah.
so is postponing or tabling action, it could also be postponing or tabling agenda items. Like, right, we could.
Yeah. So let's add
For clarity.
postponing or tabling actions or agenda items. Mary, I'm relying on you.
Okay,
Well,
send me screenshots.
okay. Meetings. Regular meetings shall take place on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of the month at 6:30 p.m. at Tracy Hall Meeting Room, Norwich, Vermont. Special meetings shall be publicly announced at least 24 hours in advance by giving notice to all members of the body unless previously waived, to the Norwich listserv, and to any person who has requested notice of such meetings. In addition, notices shall be posted in the municipal clerk's office. 3. Emergency meetings may be held without public announcement, without posting of notices, and without 24-hour notice to members, provided some public notice thereof is given as soon as possible before any meeting. Emergency meetings may be held only when necessary to respond to an unforeseen occurrence or condition requiring immediate action by the public. Immediate attention. Oh, attention, thank you. And that's by law. Number 4. A member of the body may attend a regular, special, or emergency meeting by electronic or other means without being physically present at a designated meeting location, so long as the member identifies him or herself when the meeting is convened and is able to hear and be heard throughout the meeting. Whenever one or more members attending electronically, voting that is not unanimous must be done by roll call. If a quorum or more of the body attend a meeting, regular, special, or emergency, without being physically present at a designated meeting location, the agenda for the meeting shall designate at least one physical location where a member of the public can attend and participate in the meeting, except where active law allows otherwise. So I thought about this because, of course, the governor's special act changed all of that. And I think that last clause accounts for that. Yes.
I mean, the only thing I'm saying is 2 through 4 is just law,
Yep.
right? So like, it's fine to have it here, but you list the law, like,
Yeah.
at the start of it.
Yeah. And it's just the VLCT saying it.
Yeah.
Okay, public participation, do I need to read through that? Is there, or is it an option in the beginning?
I did have a comment under number 2
Okay,
that I said I would like to stay with the well-established tradition of asking members of the public to limit their comments to 3 minutes. This encourages the public to be concise. So number 2.
I'm all for being concise. I also worry that sometimes, especially of late, things have been sort of emotional, and it makes me feel like it wasn't helping us to be didactic about that. We should be a little bit respectful. I think maybe we're finished with that for the moment. We've passed that maybe, but I just worry about having a timer and stopping people at 2 minutes.
Well, we haven't done that, but if maybe we say the chair may ask the public to limit the length of their comments or something like that.
Which I do in my housekeeping, Mary.
I agree with Pam on the duration, and I think just calling upon the public to be concise as you did today, but putting that number on it, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the public expects us to be respectful, and I think we expect the public to be respectful of our time. And, you know, the time that we have to give to all the residents to get the work done, so I think it's completely reasonable, ask for a time, and I'm, you know, having an egg timer's pretty icky. But, you know, or, you know, give everybody turns, it's like, you know, you don't get to, you have to go to the end of the line before you begin, that kind of thing. So,
Well, I guess the question is, do we really need to put it in the codification?
should we have a motion?
I mean, I agree with both. I think it should actually say the chair will request the member of public to wrap up at 3 minutes. Like, I think rather than say may limit, I think it's the obligation to remind them that they spent 3 minutes on the mic, right? Because I think the other thing, it acknowledges that you may very well have gotten lost in your comment. It is stressful and difficult to sometimes to make a public comment. And so could be very much an act of kindness to say, like, hey, you've been speaking for 3 minutes, because it encourages them to quickly summarize their comment and then move on. So I would say the chair may remind a public comment. I think we should keep the 3 minute time and actually say, please wrap up, you've been speaking for 3 minutes.
When, if we adopt this, it helps the chair, if the vice chair did that, I think, you know.
As long as we don't
Yeah, and they took the candidates, right? There's no, I can sit here and I'm going. It's not an indication of the 3 minutes is.
Members of the
Some
public,
discreet thing.
members of the public,
And lots of communities do that, and like lots of, like there are communities that have like a little timer on their computer.
Right.
I do have a 3 minute.
Yeah,
Members of the public shall be afforded reasonable opportunity to express opinions or give information about matters considered by the body, so long as order is maintained according to these rules, period. The chair may suggest completing the comments within 3 minutes.
yeah, this is true. Our difficult decision that we'll have to do.
May.
Yeah.
You can call it suggest, you know. You can frame the conversation.
Can you write that? Can you write that down?
Ooh, you have to say it again.
The chair may suggest.
Oh, that's so neat.
Yeah, the chair may, gives you power to use it if you need to use it.
Okay, the chair may suggest.
The commenters include their remarks.
Commenters
Include within 30 minutes.
their remarks. Within minutes.
Okay. Okay. We're 15 minutes into this. Let's see.
You might do so well. This, you know, adopt it next year, going through it like that.
That's true. Okay, number 2, after each agenda item is introduced by the chair, the select board will have the opportunity to discuss first, but before any action is taken by the public body at each meeting, there may be reasonable time afforded for open public comment. Comment number 3, by the public or members of the body must be addressed to the chair or the body as a whole, but not to any individual member of the public, of the body or public. 4, speak up with their problems. Members of the public must be acknowledged by the chair before speaking. 5, if a member of the public has already spoken on the topic, he or she may not be recognized again until others have first been given the opportunity to comment. If a member of the public wishes to make the same comment as someone else, they should concur with a previous speaker and not reiterate the point.
There's a typo.
Where's the title?
It says the member of the future.
Of the what?
Left out on public.
I was a passenger in a car. I was doing this.
I just spotted it.
Wow.
I didn't see it before.
Okay. Number 6.
Uh-oh. Oh, they're waking up. Ralph, you are listening?
She's taking these.
What I'm gonna say is, I don't want to bog you down with like me getting every detail of this discussion of the text.
I know, we just
You know,
want to make sure you're awake.
oh, I can make up this look at my phone.
Okay. The morning room.
Number 6, order and decorum shall be observed by all persons present at the meeting. Neither members of the body nor members of the public shall delay or interrupt the proceedings or the peace of the meeting or interrupt or disrupt any person whilst disturb. Members of the body and members of the public are prohibited from making personal, impertinent, threatening, or profane remarks. Now, again, we are not going to judge those things. We'll know it when we see it. Number 7. Members of the body and members of the public shall obey the orders of the chair or other presiding member. The chair should adhere to the following process to restore order and decorum. I lost my computer at one bit.
Meeting. Decorum of a meeting, yeah, they bypass,
But may bypass any or all steps when he or she determines in his or her sole discretion that deviation from the process is warranted. A, call the meeting to order and remind members of the applicable rules of procedure. B, declare a recess or table issue. C, adjourn the meeting until a time and date certain. D, order the constable to remove disorderly persons from the meeting. Constable was their word, but I figured doesn't matter. Yes.
There's another typo. You have tie instead of time. I see. One C.
Okay.
And, yeah, I have a question, constable. There was recently a case in Massachusetts.
I know the case.
I'd like to hear about it.
I'll send you the article, but basically, a woman sued the town because, she was basically thrown out of the meeting because that she was deemed to be disruptive, and they said it was a violation of her First Amendment rights.
This happened in Montpelier, even more locally. ACLU's. So
So it's, even though they may be saying things you don't want to hear, under the First Amendment, they have the right to express their opinion.
Yes, but how they express it should be.
I guess I'd be very careful about not moving anyone from the meeting unless they were getting violent.
Yeah.
Right. Can I speak to this? I agree with that, you know, that we should be careful about the speech issues. If there was a violent person, it would be handy to have someone to remove that person, if possible. I don't really like to say too much about that. We used to have, back in the Doug Robinson days, he attended almost every meeting.
He's in the back of the room, Jen Frank stood in the back of the room, and she was.
So it's kind of the practice, and maybe that's for Collins, I don't know. But thinking about what really did happen is a little scary.
Yeah, but I don't want to ask our police chief to do that. I think they volunteered and we appreciated that, but I don't think we want to require it.
I mean, have these other tools, like just adjourn. Instead of, it's like fight or flight, you know, it's adjourn.
Because it's here, gives the option, it doesn't say that it has to be done.
Oh,
Right, I mean, it might be, people go crazy sometimes, and it might be useful to be able to have someone.
Maybe we say we request the person to leave rather than remove.
I would delete D.
just to avoid the whole controversy.
Well, I mean, obviously, if something is really out of order, you would necessarily have to call it out. So I think it would be.
Okay, I think that's probably wise.
Okay.
No, it's adoption.
So, on my, if anybody printed it, I've got, I think the date that it was adopted or something,
Right.
and then signatures for everybody. So why don't we,
Clean it up.
we'll clean it up and have it here for signature next time. Right? So everybody, but we need to, do you want to vote on it now or vote after you see it? We can vote on that, vote after you see it.
I'll make a motion to approve this policy with the suggested amendments.
But we might be in the same situation, well, give me 1 second.
You want a second? Sure. Yeah,
Seconded by Priscilla.
I think we should have some rules and procedures right now, we've none, technically.
That's actually a good point.
Good point, yes.
Okay. So we're going to do what?
So
Get these
there's
typed
a
up with
motion.
the changes and then we'll sign them next week on the 29th, along with the correspondence policy.
Yeah, we may end up being in the same position with the correspondence, but I mean, with procedures, because we may actually have another change, but we'll do it again. So, motion on the table, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And you probably-
Priscilla.
So, thank you. All right, okay, so consent agenda. The board briefly discussed, that's, consent agenda is item number 8. The board briefly discussed last time whether we can separate these items or just approve them all at once as we've done in the past, which is not to say that we don't divide them up as we discuss as we go through them. So does anyone have an opinion about that to start with? Do we want to keep them as one unit and approve them as a consent agenda, or do we want to divide them up?
Personally, I've never liked having them, the consent agenda.
Okay.
Some lights.
All right, so we have one against Mary.
Well, thinking about that we have our own policy about correspondence, we're gonna have to put a little time into that no matter what, just to, sort it out, 1, 2, 3. So that kind of, kind of rules against consent agenda. I think consent agenda was to try to speed everything up, just to get them through. It likely would not need to have much amending, like if all the minutes were in order. And an AP is in fine. It's a way to do that, but I'm not sure it works.
Right, so I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. People can discuss anything listed in the consent agenda in the discussion, and then obviously after this, there is no consent agenda, is what as Mary was saying, because of our correspondence policy and some other things. So I think in the spirit of the death of the consent agenda, I move to approve the consent agenda.
And I will second the death of the consent agenda.
Any further discussion?
What did we vote on?
Oh, okay, so the consent agenda was always the correspondence, the warrants, and
Yeah, it's listed, but what does it mean, a consent agenda?
I know I had trouble with that concept always. It basically means that if you vote to approve, you approve them all.
Without discussion.
Well, you can hold correspondence, you can talk about things, so effectively, we were kind of treating them independently, but.
It's sort of like you don't discuss until you think there might be a reason.
You discuss it all as a group, right? Except for then everyone had lots of questions about each thing, so it's effectively no consent agenda.
So are we voting to get rid of the idea of a consent agenda?
No, we were joking a little. We made a motion to approve the consent agenda and seconded it, and now we were discussing it, I think.
Because we have to keep with what's on the agenda. We have to do a consent agenda tonight, but the consensus is that we will not do that in the future.
Yes, after that, of the consent agenda.
Right.
So,
Thank
and
you.
fair warning, it's 9 o'clock, and I'm thinking we have a lot to get through, so I want to make sure that we're finished by 10 o'clock, and whatever we don't finish, I would think we may want to consider tabling. Does anyone agree with that? Okay. All right. Ms. Cheryl Nygaard.
Chair, Just two things with regard to your discussion on the accounts payable. If this is successful, having the meetings here and having the AP on as a item on the agenda, if it could be in the beginning of the meeting, such that going back to an old routine, which really worked well, would be to have the checks and the invoices here to get done, does help for consideration only, I'm saying. And one thing I do want to mention and speak to the town manager on it, but sometimes there's items on the warrant that you have approved that have not subsequently been paid. And so therefore, I think somehow that should come back to the board, maybe to just like say, well, we approved this warrant, but actually something didn't get paid from it, and update the board. I don't know. It's one of those things. I don't know a procedure that exists for that, but I feel like maybe it's something to think about.
Well, I think that is an excellent segue to the last item on this agenda, which is talking about how we're gonna get to procedures.
Okay.
So hold that thought. Okay, so now I would like to call a question, all in favor of in future having no consent agenda, but addressing each item separately.
We didn't vote on it.
We haven't voted that.
Approving this, where it's certainly this, we haven't voted on.
Oh,
My motion is to approve your consent agenda.
So we need to vote on that first.
okay, so somebody has done that?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Roger, make a
and-
motion, I second it.
Okay, and so before we just vote on it, does anybody want to pull any correspondence? I thought we needed to just, I have notes about each piece of correspondence, which I want to just address in the spirit of following our correspondence procedure. So I would like to pull each one of those and say something about each one.
All right, let's do it fast.
We're gonna do it fast. Very snappy. Before we get to that, does anyone have, I know we have some issues with the draft meeting minutes. I know that, Dino Sopronis had mentioned that the board's approval of the cruiser replacement policy was brought up by him. I don't know if we want to amend those minutes to show that he spoke. That's been an issue that we've talked about in the past. Just because someone mentions a topic, do we want it to go in the minutes? Should we identify everybody who speaks? I know it's been sort of both ways.
So we're talking about how the minutes should be presented, who should be included.
Well, I mean, this begs the question because Demo is saying that he brought up something, and the fact that he pointed out that this had been pre-approved by the board and we were just basically now following through and approving the funds to pay for the thing that we approved, and that he brought it up. Is that important to the minutes?
So
Dan's got a hand up.
First of all, I understood that there was a format of you submit what you want in there, but secondly, I could find no presentation by anyone for that cruiser. And the policy says that any purchase between 25,000 and 150,000 requires 3 bids, and there are no bids in any of the packets. So I'm not sure that this board ever approved the purchase of that cruiser until it's here, and what are we gonna do?
Well, I do remember that coming in front of us. I can't say
It's-
that I
it's-
remember that. Yeah. and I
It's
can't-
not in any packet though.
Yeah. I think this goes to, the whole need to refresh our procedures, and that would include, I really think we need sort of the running log of what we've approved, when we've done it, so that we can look back, just basically a distillation of minutes that's searchable. And make it a database.
I have a suggestion on that. When we get to revising the master personnel policies, if we approve a purchase order, I think there should be a place on the purchase order, just like when the DRB approves something, it's signed by the chair of the DRB and it's dated. I think the chair of the select board needs to sign it and date it, and then that makes it an official purchase order. Until then, it's not a purchase order.
Well, I think we need to talk about all these because we obviously need a better system. But that begs the question for this particular thing, because Demo is saying that something happened that you couldn't find evidence for.
So my motion was to approve the consent agenda, which would mean that this gets accepted. And so I think, so yes, it gets accepted.
I just wanted to point out before we get through the minutes that we had that one, I think some of the floor piece on the first, number one on the minutes, which was, even before, meeting was convened by, should read out the service chair for them.
Right, yeah, on page one.
Yeah.
March
So,
8th minutes.
yes. Yeah, Ralph,
I'm trying to find this.
it's the first paragraph after the organization meeting paragraph, and so the meeting was convened by Callaway. It was actually convened by Brennan Duffy. Okay, and then the second thing was Pam's email, which didn't get into the packet and involved the, it involves the procedures, but we've discussed that already. So that's all I had for the minutes. The AP warrant, I didn't have any questions about it. Did anybody else? Or the tax refund warrant?
I had, Priscilla, this may sound really petty, but I looked at the AP and I saw that there was an item, $13.51 for breakfast put on a town card, and I thought, oh, and then there were DPW lunch and supplies for 27. I mean, I'm asking this question without prejudice, because I mean, there may have been perfectly legitimate reasons. I was just a little surprised to see them on the accounts payable.
I don't really have a direct answer to that.
It said business card, Shawnee?
It said, I can't really read it, but the type is so small. Looks like BHANN 2/8 HANN.
Yeah, 2/ is it 8? I don't know. I know it's very little bit of money, but it's like, well, I don't know.
No, I think it's worth bringing up, and I think that should be a policy that we, is it okay? Do people do that? And maybe we just bring that up with Brendan, I don't know.
So we do have people who have like a town debit card or credit card.
We have one town card that is shared as required for purchase.
That's another whole.
So I'd have to look specifically at that and say, who was that? What was the
And maybe we have lunch supplies routinely of certain basic condiments or something for the DPW. I don't know. I just didn't know.
I think if you can find out for us, that would be good.
I can answer that question if somebody wants me to wants me to say anything. So if I can jump in here, because I'm Chris Kaufman, I'm the DPW director. So yes,
Chris Kaufman, you're being recognized.
thank you. Just because those small items were brought up. Yeah, so we do get small supplies like paper plates and some cups and things like that, because the folks work, sometimes 12, 15 hours and, they're eating there. And these are, I think reasonable and appropriate accommodations for the folks who are putting in very long hours. And I try to make their time there as reasonable as possible. Sometimes they come in and they don't have appropriate things to eat with. So plastic forks and plastic spoons and things like that. So that's it.
Sounds very reasonable.
Sure, thank
You
you.
should buy condiments next, Chris.
Team Demo, I would recognize you to speak.
Thank you. Okay, can everybody hear me all right?
We can.
Okay, thanks. So first of all, my compliments to the board. I just want to say that you seem very relaxed this evening and you're working very cohesively as a group. And I really commend you for that. And I hope you're all doing okay tonight. The reason I waited for this time because it's in the actual agenda item and public comment. So the draft, Marcia, you mentioned it just a few minutes ago. The draft select board minutes for 3/8/2023 failed to state that I spoke on behalf of the new cruiser purchase. Now, I did hear you speak about some particulars of it wasn't, it was or it wasn't approved. You couldn't find anything. That's not what I'm questioning here. All I'm saying is that I did get up and speak on behalf of it, and it was part of the cruiser replacement policy originally that had not been done for whatever reason, COVID, a whole bunch of different things. And now it was back on track and the cruiser is here and it needed, to be purchased. So I guess I just want to say that where it was not mentioned that I even spoke about it is all I'm saying. So right after Chief Cochran did his presentation, if you all recall, I asked to speak. Marcia, you granted me permission to speak. And I just stated that the new cruiser was one that had been part of the original cruiser replacement policy and should be approved as it was previously approved by the board in 2022. It was back ordered at that time and now is here and needs to be paid for. Right after that, Roger Arnold made the motion, which the board passed. I believe it was 4-1. So thanks for considering making the necessary change to just simply state that I got up and spoke. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dimo. And that's been, the motion is to approve that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Next, I was asking about the warrants and we had one question. Any other questions? Pam?
I see that we're making a payment to Sullivan and Powers, which puts us in the range of about $25,000 so far for the audit. And I'm just wondering, are we going to see more invoices for this, or are we coming in right around 25 on that?
I believe that's the bulk of it. And we also made the overture and it seemed like it was accepted that they would continue to work with us through our policy and procedure. So I didn't say that we would see another invoice from them if we asked them for additional.
Right. Well, that would be a different topic. This is the audit. So
I guess I couldn't tell you right now. That's the funnel, but I don't see any more coming in. I think the audit's been completed. Actually, I guess I would say we'll probably get a bill for the time for extending this time.
okay, I think the board approved like 26,000 and we're right around 25. So yeah, I'm hoping that this is drawing to a close and we're staying within that $26,000.
Yeah, I think as we go forward and discuss how we're going to start reorganizing the procedures, the policies, all of that stuff, we may be calling on them and it may be a little bit later in the year, but I think I think these are sort of almost emergency circumstances. So we might, if we needed to, dip a little bit into our emergency fund, but we can talk about that.
Right. Well, you remember we're budgeted $14,250 and you've got one bid of 26,000. So we're already way over what we budgeted.
Right. But I think in the long run, we'll save ourselves money if we get ourselves organized properly. I think they may use that.
Yeah, it's a way better audit than in the past, I would say.
Absolutely. All right, so now I'm going to go through, if we can pass down the warrants, and while I'm going through the rest of the correspondence, people can be signing the warrants, moving us along, and then we'll get to the RFPs.
Sure. We need to vote on the motion.
That's right. Well, after I go through the correspondence, and we can vote, because it's still part of the consent.
Oh, so you're still, all right, that's how you're done, sorry.
No, not that. I'm gonna have you guys sign that while I'm going through the rest of this. Okay. All right, this isn't consistent with our correspondence policy. So Stuart Richards had sent in something regarding select board members and town manager, and that was pre-election. And I think that, at this point, no select board response is required. John Cushman sent in a, correspondence regarding Article 36 non-compliance by the town, specifically looking for a report of the amount of fossil fuel purchased during the period of the last annual report. All of these things were voted for in Article 36. Establishment of a green procurement task force, inclusion of climate impact statements for all major decisions, focus on seeking state, federal financing to supplement town investments in climate action, and centering public bodies and officials on the climate crisis. I would agree and recommend that the board prioritize these requests, and I would like to work with these requests and work them into sort of a global plan for the board's work this year. I think that is going to need more discussion by the board, for presentation and discussion at maybe our second meeting in April, if we can put something together. Again, I'm thinking of us kind of getting an idea of what our work is going to look like this year, and beginning to finalize some approaches to seeing it come to fruition. And I do think, the UN's report this week was, we can't say it wasn't sobering. And we need to sort of start thinking about that. Should have been thinking about that. Number 4, Charles Lindner wrote to say that Norm Levy has resigned from the Energy Committee, so I would guess that this ad should be advertised by the town manager's office pretty quickly to request volunteer applications. David Bartlett has resigned from the Rec Council. If this is one of a certain number of positions of the council, I would ask that the position be advertised by the town manager's office to request volunteer applications. And that includes the correspondence. So
There are a number of committee positions that need to be dealt with. Do we want to do it piecemeal, or do we want to do it?
we usually leave it to the town manager's office to put them all in a packet for us. Like all together, yeah.
So maybe in the April 12 packet or April 26, we would review that.
Yeah, we would leave that to the town manager, but I just, to the extent that we said in our correspondence that we would address these, that's what I just did.
Okay.
So, okay, now we're on to item 9. We're not, even though we're not, sorry, thank you. We do have a motion on the table, which has been seconded, has it not?
Yes.
May I call the question? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you very much.
Do we need a motion to say that these things will be separate in future agendas, or just go with that as a
I'll
consensus?
just do it.
Okay.
All right, now item 9, RFPs for the DPW line stripping, culverts, and generator. You will note, board, that in our motion sheet, there are actually 4 motions, and I understand that because we have 2 culvert issues that are treated separately. And we know that Chris Kaufman is here, so Chris Kaufman, you present.
Thank you. So I put these RFPs out to bid because they were over the $25,000 mark, and in particular, I don't know how you want me to address these one by one, or just
Let's start with line stripping.
line striping. Yeah, line striping. So for line striping, we put those out to bid on February the 3rd. We received 1 response from L&D Safety Marking Corporation. They're the biggest line striper in the state, and so they're very capable of doing the work. And this is to mark all the basically crosswalks, all the lettering down on Main Street, and then most of the center lines, white fog lines, and the stop bars throughout the town. And basically, we got a bid for $70,223, and so my intention was to break it up over 2 fiscal years, 2023 and 2024. which would allow us to perform this activity, and L&D is willing to do that work. So I recommended to the interim town manager, select board, to approve the line striping for the $70,223.
Do you want a motion on that, Michelle?
Yeah, then we can discuss.
Okay, I move to authorize the interim town manager to approve the bid by L&D Safety Marketing Corporation to complete line striping work for an amount not to exceed $70,223 to be paid from operating budget funds for FY23 and FY24.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Chris, I'm just wondering, normally I think we've seen the actual, bids. Are you not putting them in here because you didn't?
Yeah, they're in the packet.
They're in the packet. I didn't see them.
There's one.
Yeah, there were two.
There were two for that?
The line striping?
No,
The line
not the
striping,
actual
no.
bids, just Chris's memo.
Yeah, we only got Chris's
There
memo.
was something really
That's,
very basic and it's signed by somebody who was planning.
that was from Brad.
That was rep. We don't have any documentation.
That's all right. Yeah, I didn't catch that. So we did have the bids that I guess we got made into the packet.
Okay,
So we're gonna have to
yeah.
just rely on it, 'cause it's not, that's all right.
Well, let's
The bid,
put those.
yeah. Do you want the bids in the packet?
Chris, let's put those in the packet for next time.
Yep, can do
And
that.
that way they're in the public record.
Yeah, I think that was not Chris's oversight. That was probably ours in the town manager's office.
Yeah. Okay. And then. Other question. Yes, Mary?
Chris, for the budget for this, is the work also split? Is it doing half the work this year and half next, or how does that work?
I'm splitting the work up, so we work within the operating budget. We have 38,000 in 2023 and 39,000 in 2024. So we just we'll split the work up accordingly to fit in that dollar amount, so we don't exceed it in the operating budget.
Do you have a strategy for what work you will leave out and what you will leave in as far as line striping?
The first part will focus on the Main Street work and whatever we can get done with the double yellow center lines, and then we'll go on to the stop bars and the fog lines. Some of it depends on, actual linear foot by the time we get out there and start measuring everything. But it's been, adequately measured, but we, some of the details, as far as final measurements and things like that. So we'll just keep it within that. So they know that already. They know they're not to exceed that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, this may be a silly question, but I'm wondering, I'm always confused about the intersection between us and the fire district and why some roads are repaired by the fire district and some, by us, and this to me would seem something of a repair, but I'm just, without getting into a, 3-page discussion, I just like to know a simple answer. Well, if you don't know, we got the auditor.
I can't speak for the fire district, but typically I think what happens is with the fire district owning the water and the piping within the roadways or sidewalks or whatever, they usually, we work with them as we did on Hazen Street to assist with road or culvert type work. But generally the repairs and the work that they have to do to access the piping is all part of that work that needs to be done. So they have to actually dig into the road to fix piping and put in corporation stops and all the things that they do. So
Okay.
and this is strictly for line striping, just on the surfaces that as it wears down, scraping and driving and water and things like that. Yep.
Okay. Did you have something?
Basically, he's covered it. When we have to tear up the road to fix a water main or something, then the fire district, part of the bidding process is repaving. I mean, Cliff Street was completely denuded of paving. It was dirt. And then they, as part of the job, it was completely repaved at the end of it. But that was part of the fire district's bidding process. It wasn't the town one.
And then did the town strike the road?
I don't think so. I don't think any striping's been done for a while.
Okay. All right. Did you have another question?
And I found the answer to my question. It's a line item in the budget. I was thinking that he was referring to a reserve fund, but he's referring to a line item in the budget under pavement margin. So, and I see that the amounts here, 38,000 and 39,000 for those 2 years. So I have no question.
Okay, Priscilla?
So if we're gonna do this over 2 budget years, can we have 38,000 for this year, which ends in end of June, and 39,000 for next year. So presumably all this could be done over the summer, but just some of it before the 1st of July and some of it after?
Right.
Correct.
I think
Correct.
that's,
Correct.
Great.
Okay. So shall we call the question on this one?
Yes.
All in favor? Unanimous, good, thank you. And now, Chris, would you please speak to the culverts?
The culverts, okay, so we have 2 sections of culvert that we proposed to do, one of which was on New Boston Road. This was a grant that was applied for in 2021 before I arrived. And so that work is to replace 4 culverts on New Boston Road. We put out the bid for all the work on New Boston and for the work that I proposed to do on Beaver Meadow. And then we got the bids back for all that work. But to just address New Boston, so we had a grant for that was, sorry, I'm looking at this really quick. We had a grant, the Better Roads grant that was for $19,300. The internal cost was estimated at $24,160. So the bids we got back on that were much more costly than what I believe was estimated in the work back when they put out for the project. The costs have gone up substantially all across for supplies and labor, significant jump in costs. So I decided to do that work internally, mainly on New Boston, for the reason that we had the equipment to be able to do that, because the culverts were fairly shallow, and we could handle that. For the work on Beaver Meadow, that would be partially funded through a 2022 grants and aid. That was for $39,500. So that work is a little more difficult. It requires a bigger excavator and a little more technical work because of the conditions out there. And these are part of a number of culverts. There's 7 of them that are undersized and need to be upgraded, because that's the next section of the Class 2 road on Beaver Meadow that we propose to pave through a paving grant that we're applying for this coming fiscal year, that we may or we may not get. So that sort of depends on a lot of factors. I'm actually meeting with VTrans on Friday to go over some grant discussions. So the Beaver Meadow work will be funded by $39,500 from the grants and aid, and the remaining work would be the remaining cost. I'm sorry, the total cost was
$750.
Yeah, thank you very much. $99,750. So we would be utilizing the remainder from the bridge fund, to designated bridge fund, to finalize that, and then the remaining amount of work for the New Boston Road would be funded subsequently from that. So the final cost from their bridge fund would be $65,110.
Questions?
We can have a motion, and I have some questions. Go ahead.
Okay. I move to authorize the interim town manager to approve the bid by Webster and Donovan Excavating Inc. to complete culvert work on Beaver Meadow Road for an amount not to exceed $99,750, to be paid in part by $39,500 from the V-Trans 2022 grants and aid, and in part by $60,250 expenditure from the Bridge Reserve Fund.
That's okay.
We're trying to do this research. I'll second it.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table for seconded, discussion. Patricia. We need names.
I'm just curious about this designated bridge fund, because I see bridge fund and I immediately think the Moore Lane Bridge, which is going to require more attention. Is this that same fund?
Yes, it's
One bridge
the,
fund, yes.
yes, it's one bridge fund, the designated bridge fund. Yes.
So that troubled me too.
So we're taking money away from fixing that Moore Lane Bridge whenever we figure out what to do about that.
Well, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Chris, that perhaps the bridge fund is the bridge fund. It's not the Moore Lane Bridge Fund. But I was thinking about this and it struck me that if we have a culvert, it's a little bit like a bridge, a dirt bridge.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes, which is also the Moore Lane Bridge. Which
Well,
makes,
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
makes some sense to me, but I'm just, is that one culvert or many culverts on Beaver Meadow? I'm not clear if there's more work to be done. as we sort of-
There's seven in the next, and there's seven in the next section of 2 miles. We want to do another 2 miles of pavement on Beaver Meadow and the shouldering that was started back on the, that we started 2 years ago. This would be the next section down, and we have a surface overlay report that talks about priorities, specific roads that need to be addressed, that have the most need. This is one of them. And so prior to doing that, we have to install and upgrade the culverts, and the culverts need to sit for a period of time so they have time for the gravel and the subsurface to settle over a period of time. So that's why we need this time to be able to upgrade these, because once we pave it, we're not going to dig. It's not smart to dig right back into the pavement again. So this is our opportunity to do that. One thing I will note is that, Stantec in their bridge management report, they use the term bridge management report, but it also refers to both culverts and short bridges, long bridges, and they're all distinguished in there as a part of the bridge management program. So it's not always just what you look at as a specific bridge. So that's why, and I know it doesn't, I think it would be great to have a designated culvert fund, but we don't have that. And I think culverts are really expensive now. I mean, based on the bids I got, we were getting about $12,000 to install, one culvert across a 20 to 25 foot road. It's a significant jump in costs over the last 2 years. And of course, we'll do in-house what we can do in-house, but there are some cases we just can't do that. And so, ultimately, as the costs increase, our operating budget cannot meet those needs based on the current, capital we have in that.
So Chris, how many culverts are we talking about for $99,000?
7.
Seven. Okay. Mayor.
What stood out for me, what Chris said, or one of the things is just undersized culverts. And I think it's very prudent. Well, I can see the logic of getting the culverts in and letting everything settle. So that's ready for the paving if we can get it. But I think it's really prudent to take care of the undersized culverts just because of the rain events that we've had. We need to have that real tough one. So I think it's just really prudent and planning. I appreciate it.
That's a good point. Are we ready to call questions, Pam?
Looking at the town report, it says that we have almost $630,000 in the bridge fund
Mhm.
for, fiscal year 23, projected expenses of 90,000, and he's projecting 65, I think it was. So he's spending less than the projected expense unless something else comes up.
That's the grant.
And then we're adding another 100,000 in 24. So I think we have adequate funds for other things that come along.
We did talk about this. I asked the question specifically, do we have enough money? We need to do something for the mortgage. And Chris said, yes, we do. So
we have other bridges that need attention too.
we do.
Tops and-
Expensive.
All right.
Yeah.
I think it's the Elm Street Bridge has been put off for years now.
Mhm. And there's another one, Chris, highlights.
I am finalizing, we are finalizing the bridge management report from Stantec and that, and I've seen the draft, been working on the draft that was started before my time. I've been, working on that to finalize. We should see a final product next week. And in that document, has the layout of which bridges need to be addressed at which particular time and the costs. I had them go back and include some new inspections that recently happened by VTrans because that wasn't included in the final report. So they've included that and updated the cost to reflect current conditions. And as a part of that, so I'm looking at to do a 10-year projection for how we're going to be funding these bridges. And I'm not ready to discuss that here and now, but that's something I think at some point we're going to have some talks about in terms of what kind of money we're setting aside for all these bridge projects. And of course, that doesn't really include what's going to eventually happen at Moore Bridge. I mean, the temporary containment may work, it may not, but at least right now, we'll have a plan of action going forward and be able to plan for it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we'll look forward to seeing that report because budget season comes around regularly. And so we need to start so that we're not stuck with a huge bill, but we're saving up. Okay, can we call the question?
Yes.
Yes.
All in favor? Unanimous, good. Now we're going to talk about the second bridge, the second culvert.
You want a motion?
Yes, please.
I would authorize the expenditure of $24,160 for the completion of culvert work by DPW staff on the Boston Road to be paid in part by $19,300 from the 2022 Better Road Grant and in part by $4,860 from the Bridge Reserve Fund.
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion? I guess my only question is the cost of this is mostly just materials because we're doing the work ourselves.
Yes,
True?
correct.
Okay. Good. All right, any other discussion, questions? Good. May I call the question? All there? Unanimous. Great. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Is there a fourth thing?
Yeah, well, we don't,
Generator. Please talk to us about a generator.
Oh, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. When I got here, we had a couple of generators out on the side of the DPW, and I had noticed that they were non-functioning. One in particular was a 1970s style 100 kilowatt military style generator. It appears as though it hasn't been operating since what appeared to be 2016. I think that was the last time it was used. It's leaking oil and potentially diesel all around it. The entire concrete is stained, and every time it rains, the sheen washes off into the adjacent property on our property. So we also have a second generator that's sitting there. This was the old generator from the police station that they took out of service. And they brought it over, I believe, with the intention of hooking it up over at the DPW. That was never done because I believe they realized that the generator is insufficient to supply the backup power needed for the DPW. So that was never hooked up. It's actually still sitting on a skids over at the DPW. So the old generator is over 50 years old, and the other generator is over 22 years old. And looks like it needs some significant work too. So instead of trying to, see what we could do with those, I believe it was time to look at getting a new generator that would provide the power that we need, the backup power that we need, and have an operational generator. The reason for this is we lost power for at least 3 days on this past storm, and it was the end of December. It was a pretty significant situation where we couldn't refuel our equipment. The emergency vehicles couldn't refuel at our station. We lost power. We had to manually lift up the doors. There was no lights. It was really a very difficult situation to be in for 3 days. And at that point, it created the incentive for me to try to put this before the board to make a decision. So I went out and put out the bids back in February. And on the 24th, we received one bid. That was from Brookfield Service Company for $47,000. Well, we got a bid from them. This was the same company that did the work at the police station. It was for $47,243 with an optional maintenance plan for $475 for the first year and an extended warranty for $650. So for a total of $48,368. And then also they have a ongoing twice a year annual maintenance plan for $720 and an internet monitoring system for a one-time fee of $600. This will allow us to know whether the generator is actually functioning, and you can utilize your phone or your computer to determine if it's actually it's working. So it's real time. You can see what's going on. And this would be a propane Kohler 48 kilowatt. And also it includes the battery, all the electrical wiring, the excavation for the propane pipe work, which would tie into our existing propane tanks in the back of the facility. They would also include removal of the existing oil stained concrete pad and replacement of that pad, and also include bollards, concrete bollards, steel concrete bollards that would protect the generator, so keep equipment from running into it. And freight, startup, training, and all permits and inspections and all the electrical work. Believe that they're very capable of doing the work. So I propose that to the town manager and the select board approve the purchase of this much needed new generator for $48,563, including the internet monitoring system for a one-time fee of $600, and also a twice a year annual maintenance plan for $720 starting after year one.
Well, we'll start from
I'll go. I would authorize the interim town manager to approve the bid by Brookfield Service Company to supply and install a new generator for the DPW for an amount not to exceed $48,563 to be paid from the generator reserve fund.
I'll second it.
So I assume for $48,563 is the total of everything that Chris itemized for us.
Yeah.
Any discussion?
First.
This is just long overdue. We need to be ready for storm events. I think it's very good. I think it's well prepared. Good preparation like this. It's just going to make everything function better. That's a
I would just say that only appropriate use of fossil fuel is as a backup. Right? So I acknowledge this is propane, fossil fuel, but it is from our generator backup. Right? So it's that seems like an appropriate.
And
After hearing the condition of the two that are sitting there on premise, I'm wondering, do we have a plan for disposal of those two units, and what will that cost?
That's included in the cost as well to take off those 2 units. I forgot to mention that, but it's in their bid. They will take those off and dispose of them.
Good, okay.
I just sort of piggybacking on Roger's comment. Obviously, we're all bothered by the fossil fuel auctions, and I just feel I have to ask, and fearing I know the answer, but is there anything out there for other industrial auctions other than this?
Not as a reliable backup source. I mean, the intention is that this is a backup in cases of emergency and will be utilized only for short durations, 2-3 days at a time during, any sort of an emergency event. So the fortunate thing is it's a reliable backup source that shouldn't be operating very much, but for the times that they are operating, they are going to be an integral part of being able to provide emergency services to the town of Norwich.
Okay, any other discussion?
Part of the discussion has been to look at battery systems, but I think it would take so many batteries that it would be cost prohibitive. But if some technology came along in the future that was more affordable, then we might look at selling off this generator that should still be in good condition and have usable life, and then replacing it with batteries. But I know, like Tesla Powerwalls, we have 2 in our house, and that's, I don't know, $14,000-$18,000 for 2 of them. And it's basically 1 kilowatt for about 3 days. So 48 kilowatts would be cost prohibitive. So unfortunately that we're kind of stuck with going with fossil fuels solutions.
Okay, may I call the question? All in favor? Unanimous? Thanks for coming, Chris.
Yeah, I just make one quick comment.
Please.
So, first of all, Chris, thank you very much for being with us here, past 9:30. And, I also just want to acknowledge the thoughtful memos that were put together here that I think are very precise and informative. And also, commend you for the ability to pivot off of the culvert project to try to save some money and use some in-house services there that we had available. And on a separate topic, probably curses with an April snowstorm here, right? Great job to your crew and yourself for getting us through this difficult winter weather, and well done.
Well, thank you, Brennan. I really take my hat off to my crew. They were really stellar and very sharp and dedicated folks, and I really appreciate their hard work. So I just want to mention that. So.
Thank you very much, and send us some proposals.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. Have a good evening. Take care.
Good night. All right. Next, long last, it is Bree Swenson. RFPs, 2 of them for a softball field and a baseball field reconstruction. Presentation, madam.
So unfortunately, my computer's not working, and so I'm working off of my phone, and I have to be here in person. So I am trying to switch back and forth on my phone in little tiny letters. So sorry about that. So down on Huntley, we have 2 ball fields. We have a softball field that hasn't been used in quite a while. It's being used as a practice field by our baseball team, and then we have Gerard Field. So my past 4 years here, we've had a combination of volunteers and the DPW helping to maintain Gerard Field. Mostly it's volunteers because we simply don't have the equipment and we have not had the manpower at the DPW to take care of the field to the specifications needed. So that's been working out until the update to Calverton standard of a 50-70 field, which is just a little bit different than what we have now, but it's really important. So it's a different field specification. I did bring this to Chris with all the specifications for the DPW to see if they could carry out this work. I was told, no, they don't have the equipment to carry out the work. Not only the manpower, but they just can't do it. So in August, I presented to the select board that we would like to go out to bid to find a company that could not only bring Cal Ripken standards to Girard Field, but also rehab the softball field. Because I strongly believe that they both need to be brought to compliance, because we can't have baseball without softball, or we create an inequity. Our girls don't have a place to play. So it was agreed that we could go out and put out an RFP for both fields using Girard Fund money. So money that's been donated to the Girard Fund being used for these two fields. So we did put it out to bid, I think in February, and we got one bid back. That seems to be the trend right now. Sorry. I had 4 people who said that they might be interested in bidding on it and want to return the bid on time. We haven't had any late bids. It's just one person. So it's Valley Turf Services. He says that the bid says that it's $17,000 for each field. That is above what I was estimating originally. I thought it would be about $26,000 for both fields. It looks like it's $34,000. The good part is that we also thought that the Girard Fund had $26,000 in it back in August. And when Joyce Hasbrook looked through the fund, there's actually 36,000. So that is enough to rehab and reconstruct both fields. My recommendation is actually that we rehab Girard first, because we have a robust baseball program that really should be done this spring, and that is the time frame that I'm being told that he can do the work, and that we can consider doing the softball field in the fall if needed, if there's any question about spending $34,000 in 1 year.
Question, Pam?
Yeah.
The memo says the current balance of the fund is $26,825.
It
Is that a
does,
mistake?
and no, it is not a mistake. So that memo was written back in August. That's the original memo. So that was the number I was given. The update at the end is the most current information. So March 23rd is the update at the end of that memo, but the original memo was in August. And that was what was presented to the select board. That was the number that I was given by that current finance director for what was in the fund. The updated number from Joyce Hasbrook is $36,000.
Someone, Mayor?
Once the fields are renovated, do they have sort of lifespan? What would you expect to have to do this again in 5 years or?
No.
Maintenance or?
So the maintenance will be grading the field. So they have a nail drag at DPW that we could use if needed. We also use a local contractor, and it's pretty low cost. It's within the budget of $100 every time he comes out there. The laser grading should probably be done every other year, and we're really going to have to see how the field holds up to see if we're going to need that again more quickly.
Is the work turf or is the work for better or dirt? Or if we say dragging with the nail?
That's in the dirt.
Okay, so it's a combination, like, because when you run the bases,
Yeah.
that's not grass, but
That
then,
is not correct.
but then the parts in between also need to be updated.
Mhm. And that's the laser grading. And so they're going to take care of all of the edging, and then they're going to add some more fill in there too. Also, one of the increases, I talked to the contractor a little bit when he dropped off his bid, and he did say he added in the bases, which I hadn't asked for, but that's a really important addition, because bases are very expensive. And so he is providing all of the bases and the anchor work.
So what is the bid? So the bid is the infield area, new base anchors, laser grading, construction of visual use pitcher's mound, and I guess now the base bid. So that's the bid.
And any sod that might be needed as well, which we can't tell because there's snow on the ground.
And sod, you said?
If there's sod needed, yes.
Okay, grass. Okay, and then what will happen with how does the grass interact with this bid? Once they put down the sod, their work is done.
They keep watering the grass until it adheres. So that's in the bid.
Okay.
They will maintain it until the grass is growing.
Okay.
But the sod is or isn't included,
The sod is included if needed.
if needed, okay? And this comes up every time the jar fund is mentioned, and I never remember the answer, but what's the language, the granting language of that fund?
So the language from the family was to do the most good for the most people. The fund lives in the recreation facilities. So that means we have to use it for rec facilities. This is the field that is used by everybody, really.
It's a facility.
Yeah, it's a facility, yeah.
Okay,
And not just by programs. We have the men's softball team, they come in there. We have lots of other people. We have a kickball group that comes down there.
okay. So the bottom line is we have the money, it's
Yes.
within the scope of the bid, we pay them.
So I'm a little confused. You said you definitely want to do one field for 17,000 and you might want to do the other one later. So are you asking for 34,000 approval tonight or 17?
I'm asking for 34.
The spring and fall, I think that you said,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah,
So-
it could be,
Or could be.
if needed.
I personally would prefer that we approve one and have you come back if you decide that the other one needs to be done. I don't see a reason to approve both if one of them may not be done.
So could I just, so my interactions with Bree on this have been, there is a question of equity, I think, between the female and male players here. I think Bree is trying to build a girls softball team, and having them practicing on a field that is subpar while the boys are practicing on a brand new, state-of-the-art Calrican field. Seems a little unfair. I think, Bree also mentioned separating these out, but I think ideally they could both be done in April, and that would probably be the preference. It was really just a question of if there was a great concern about the funding. And again, to me, it seems like there is appropriate funding to do both of these at once and do them quickly and have them ready for both teams for the spring.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. You'll enjoy this question. Can't the baseball field also be the softball field, or does the softball field require different technical specs than a baseball?
Different
field?
dimensions.
Okay.
Yes.
Different-
I asked that too. I used to play softball and I was like, okay, that's right. That is completely different.
I would think that to the extent we might be able to lock something in, the way things are going up, I'd like to see us lock it in if we could.
I guess my question was a matter of timing. I thought you were maybe pushing out to August or something. If you're talking about, getting it done in fiscal year 23, then,
Right now, the bid says that he can get both of them done by August 30 and have crews out there working on the field simultaneously.
so what does that do to your girls softball?
Girls softball, I mean, they're just gonna be at the same time as the boys, right? So it'll be okay while the fields are being worked on. I mean,
Well,
what they're getting out of it, it'll be.
I think the earlier memo suggested that if you start growing grass in the fall, then it would be ready for the spring. In this case, we're planting in the spring, so what does that mean?
In that meeting, we also talked about the fact that that's ideal. And that if we were going to look at the spring, we were going to request that they maintain the grass until it roots. And that's what we've done.
This requires more than.
It does, and we can't do that down there. We don't have electricity. I have no pump to get it out of the river and not sure we want to do that with more later, so.
You're using it as being while you're trying to grow it.
Yeah.
May I call a question?
You haven't had a motion.
I moved to authorize the interim town manager to approve the bid by Valley Turf Services to complete reconstruction of the Gerard baseball field and the softball field for an amount not to exceed $34,000 to be paid from the Gerard fund within the rec facilities reserve fund.
Second. Any more discussion?
Are you second?
I did. So. Roger did this one, but it said 17. Yeah.
There was an
update.
There was an addendum. Right, so, and then we also-
Good. All right. All right.
Can somebody tell, I'm looking at the town budget, I can't, where's the Gerard fund or, I don't disbelieve you, but I can't.
Facilities.
Yes.
Part of the.
So there's nothing separately broken out.
Do you know the fund number?
Fund 5, I believe.
Seven. Yep, there it is. You're right. Oh, recreation facilities. Okay.
I just like to know where the money is.
Yeah, I kind of like to see that accounted for separately, but the Gerard fund, yeah. That
My
would be
motion says the drawer fund within the rec facilities fund.
Right. But at some
That's
point, I
the
think
current
it would be good to
situation.
have separate accountability.
Okay, any further discussion? Are we ready to call into action? Ready? Ready? All in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for dealing with my lack of a computer.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, thank you for being here at 10 o'clock to.
Oh, it's fine.
Should
Sounds
we,
like at home now.
should we bring for the TROC contract?
Yes. So we are, number 11, possible Article 10, revote action. We are not taking action on it, right? We're going to discussions that we had earlier. So item 12 is to extend the TROC contract ending 3/31/23 for zoning assistance. I believe that is a self-explanatory title. To the extent that we have a contract with TROC to provide a planner for Norwich's interim needs pending identification of a full-time person. The current contract expires, as we know, 3/31, and the extension runs through 6/30/23. Brennan, would you like to speak more to this?
I think it's fairly self-explanatory. Kyle is doing a good job as far as we can tell. He seems happy and busy. And again, it's a pretty critical piece to have in our municipal government to have a zoning administrator on. So we hope that you will support continuing the contract.
Motion?
Motion?
I move to authorize the interim town manager to sign the addendum for contract extension as included in the meeting packet to secure municipal zoning services to be provided by Two Rivers and the Quechee Regional Commission staff.
Seconded by Mary. Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Great. Now, if we can do this, I'm just going to say it in 15 minutes or less. The discussion items for the night are basically all revolving around plans to implement the auditor's recommendations, including a review, I would hope, of the VLCT Internal Financial Controls checklist for municipalities in preparation for financial policies updated. What I'd like to do is not tonight, but I think hopefully perhaps wrap some of this into the special meeting next week and maybe beyond that. But what we want to do is begin to discuss how this board is going to ensure implementation of the auditor's recommendations. And to that end, I know Mary has put in a memorandum as well. I've included the VLCT checklist for municipalities. And what I was hoping to do was to prep a larger future discussion, which I envisioned as starting with the formation of a subgroup to work through that checklist. The problem is the statutes in Vermont don't delve into the structure of individual towns. So where some towns may have only a treasurer who does all the financial functions and others are set up more like us, there's no statutory roadmap for how those have to function. And as we heard from the auditors, those kinds of communication things are key. So I sort of propose 3 things: that we, first begin to understand the weaknesses that the auditors have identified and think carefully about their recommendations. And then as part of that process, secondly, to understand how Norwich thinks it should be structured. And to use that checklist to help us figure that out. Who's doing what task, where there's overlap, where there's tension, where there's gaps. And then bring the results of that checklist work into a broader discussion with the board about how we want to develop our financial policies and then identify the underlying procedures that are described by the policies. So in my mind, we can sort of do this by setting up subgroups, which I'd like to talk about next time, where we actually perhaps have a group that starts thinking about what needs to be done in terms of those recommendations, another group that's looking at with the financial office and the treasurer, how things are flowing and what we need to do to fix flows or improve them or invent processes that don't exist. And then the last step again would be for the board to sort of consider all of that so that we're sure that we're targeting all of those things and meeting our fiduciary duty to make sure that the place is running as smoothly as it can. So for tonight, all I wanted to do was to introduce these kind of ideas to the board and to suggest that at our special meeting, we start to really grapple with this and how we might put it together. Pam.
Is this leading up to rewriting our master financial policy?
I believe that would be it.
Okay.
And then from there, the procedures, you know, I know certainly where I used to work, there were procedures that followed policies. And sometimes you had screenshots of things so that the person who walked in next and sat in the seat could look at the policy and then look at the procedure and understand what they were supposed to do. Yes, right.
So I think procedures are actually like a good place to begin, because when we wrote the master financial policies, it was like, remember, it was like ladies through lunch. It was like you, Claudette, and I, like you wrote this while everyone else was on vacation. So
And a pertinent remark.
we did that. We did that. And it was long, and I remember Claudette and I, with your kind support, were really sort of asking the town manager to codify procedures. And it was agreed that it was their responsibility to do so, and that they would, but didn't. I now know why. It was sort of an responsibility. So yes, absolutely, procedures. And I think to the extent that those procedures are near a manual, like maybe.
Well, it sounds to me like our auditors have already started doing some stuff, but I think you can sort of carefully step through all of that. Mary?
I'm hoping that our policies are broad and based in principle, and then supported by manuals and supported by procedures, because I think that things can change as far as procedures. For instance, if there's a different kind of software used or something like that. So you think you have to have some flexibility on procedures. I noticed he was talking about, and I don't know what this is, COSO manual, it's an accounting manual. So it seems that there might be some other resources that are needed to do a good job on this, which is not my bailiwick, I just say that. But I think it's long overdue effort, and it's going to be kind of epic. Organizing and getting the work done for that is going to be.
It's going to
be great, but it's going to be a lot of work.
Going to test our organizational abilities, but I have confidence in our being challenged abilities too. That's right. Roger.
There's also HR files that detail the continuity of problems between finance directors. So you will see that town managers and finance officers said very similar things about those communications and those rules and procedures. And so to the extent that it's part of an HR report, that it respects everyone's privacy, that really needs to be looked at. People have written letters.
Well, I appreciate that. I think what we need to do, and I think from the first reading of that checklist, we're going to sort of address these things that have been problematic and just do it going forward and get everything straight. Yes, Pam.
Can we get copies of the manuals that Rick was saying that he's already provided to the finance office and get those distributed?
I haven't seen those either, so yeah, that's a good question, and I think Yeah, I guess in my mind, we should bring every piece of information that we can and then try to build off of that with our own unique Norwich.
Very diplomatically stated.
So I think, what we can do, I think, Mary and I will start, trying to brainstorm some ideas, bring those next week, and then we'll make some assignments, and people will be off and running, okay? And we'll get this organized, and it's gonna be the board, finance office, the town manager's office, the treasurer's office. It's going to be comprehensive.
And possibly a consultant, and since the auditor.
Exactly.
So who's willing for their something.
Yeah. And if there's other stuff that we find we need, we can do that, but I think it has to be done and it has to be a priority. Okay, so, that said, I think we now have a special meeting coming up next week, which we all know about. And we're gonna pack in what we need.
I was gonna say, should I put on the agenda, review of policies and procedures or something to that effect as well?
Yeah, and Mary and I will have something, to put in a packet for you.
Is this for next Wednesday?
For next Wednesday.
Okay, we've got to crank them down.
I'll do some work this week.
Okay.
You only need to do it on Tuesdays, special meeting, so you have.
Yeah, maybe.
There's more time.
Okay, yeah, but we have to think. But anyway, we'll do that. And then, I had put on my.
And the HR thing for Brennan, right?
Yes.
Wednesday. Is that enough?
Yes, and the HR can involve looking at some finances. And then for April 12th, just looking ahead, I think, we may need to be talking about the interim town manager contract, possibly the town manager search, maybe more about human resources, and then, as I say, whatever comes through the door.
We'll be having appointments. This is the thing, appointments to these committees, they all have expiring terms, and so it's usually, we're usually ending around that date, and so we would have to start, and it generally takes like a whole meeting.
I saw some were expiring at the end of March, some were expiring in June, and so they don't think they all.
I've never heard of June, you said that last time, I've never known that.
Well, we'll.
I don't know, it sticks in my mind that I
So
said at
that
some
would be
point.
reviewing of, appointments to
Yeah.
commissions and committees.
So Miranda generally sends out a message and says, you know, there's an opening on this committee, please apply here.
Should we figure out, whether that should be on the 26th or the 12th, or do you want it on the 12th for sure?
Well, maybe if you guys can look and see what really is necessary, I mean, we can sprinkle them out. I mean, it's nice to get them all done, but we're gonna have to sort of
That's a good idea, we could do it.
be judicial about how much we devote, okay? Yes, Priscilla.
To add to the list.
Okay,
We were gonna talk about a liquor license for Carpenter and Lane at some point.
Yeah, that never came to us.
Well, they need it sometime in April. And last time we talked about doing a big study of where, but, or is this included in something I don't recognize the name, but where, who's at what, on the grade level and all that stuff. We said we do that on an urgent basis.
yeah, and I think that is all part and parcel, it's gonna feed into the policies. Right, the
Personnel too.
and personnel. So kind of one step at a time, but it's all coming right out.
And that's part of the work plan that you were talking about putting
Yes.
together.
Yes. And we may have
I was just gonna say,
yeah, go ahead.
cannabis dispensary
Yes, go
discussion,
ahead.
was that when you're
That was be my next.
going along with the liquor licenses?
Really?
Yes.
Serious?
Well, we've had an overture from someone interested in opening up a dispensary, and there are some procedures that you need to go through at the municipal level to allow that to happen, and I guess we could work with our town clerk. I think you could help us follow through that entity in those towns, but
I did. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, however that rolls out, we would have the gentleman in question is very interested in having this reviewed by the town.
So what I read, just briefly, because I didn't have time to look at it too closely, but it looks to me like we actually have to have a town vote. And, right, and so that would be a special town meeting unless we could piggyback onto the meeting that's coming up. But
I think there's also a creation of similar to the Board of Liquor Control, there's a cannabis control board that
that's
is,
right.
I believe appointment, or maybe it's just one board myself. So that makes decisions on this.
So that, the intrigue on that alone would take up half that meeting, right? So like, in seriousness, right? Like, we'll have like, I mean, 3 minutes, we got the egg timer, right? Like that will be of a significant public interest, so like clear the agenda.
Well, maybe it's a special meeting.
You're your own person. What would trigger a special meeting or a special town meeting to consider this topic?
The law.
Yeah.
Basically, the requirement of the law is that you can't remember now, don't quote me, but you can't, say that you can't grow it, but you can, but the town does have to approve a retail establishment.
But why would it have to be a special town meeting and not wait until the next
It
town
could
meeting?
be an annual town meeting, or it could be a special town meeting. So all I was saying was we had a special town meeting coming up. And if we were ready, but I don't know what the retail, yeah, I don't know what the retailer asked us. Certainly, I think it's would require a lot of town discussion. And, you know, I don't know that we could be ready for that special meeting. And then the question becomes, do we pay for a special meeting? Or do we wait for the next annual? Because we're not having one, I understand, in November.
No, there's no election this November. It's an off year. I'm just wondering why we would bend over backwards to do a special town meeting or something like this. Is there a requirement somewhere? Does he have to get, so many signatures to bring it to?
I don't know the ins and outs of it. I don't think there's a requirement that the town has to hold a special vote, like a new election for this. I think it goes in as requirement that the town must vote to allow. We can find out some more of the details.
And since they missed this March meeting, maybe it has to wait till next March.
Well, I'll send you the FAQs. It's there's a lot of information. So you can read about it.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.
It's a tie.
Pam is voting, is moving, and Mary, would you like to second it? Yes, I will second. All in favor? We are adjourned.
I voted.
And we are unanimously adjourned at 10:15. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.